Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
Ashara Dayne was rocking her daughter in her arms as she watched the horses and carriage approaching Starfall. They were coming with dark tidings. A messenger had arrived a few hours earlier to inform the household of the business of the approaching riders. Daven the steward met with the man. Daven had arranged rooms for the messenger and for the coming guests. They would be entering Starfall privately, seen by as few prying eyes as possible. It was for the best, Ashara believed. Too many should not know the tidings the men were bringing, not yet. Arthur, her elder brother, was dead. He couldn't be dead, not Arthur. He had been the best sword in all the world. How could Ned, of all the men in Westeros, have been the one to kill him? Alysanne, Alysanne, sweet and gentle, she sang, lulling her little girl into a restful slumber. You will meet your father today, sweet Alysanne. The riders drew nearer, and she felt her heart sink just a little more. Life was not supposed to have been this way. She should be married to Ned. They should be living in the Red Keep with Aaliyah and her babes and Arthur. She left the window and walked the short distance to the nursery. Willa, the nursemaid, was straightening the room when she entered. She half expected Illyria, her 7-year-old sister, to be in the room, but Ally was across Dorne at the Water Gardens. Their father had sent Illyria away shortly after Ashara returned to Starfall so that the girl wouldn't know of Ashara's pregnancy. Their eldest brother Aaron would return with her when he returned from Sunspear. She just ate, Ashara informed the nurse, and she has been up since before daybreak, so she should sleep well for a few hours. I will be meeting with our guests in the solar. Of course, my lady, I will watch over your little one. The nursemaid smiled warmly. Ashara returned the smile, though she knew her expression held no true pleasure. She walked slowly to the solar, the room which had once been her father's and was now her brother's. She did not want to be in that room, it reminded her too keenly of what the war had cost her. Her father was gone, slain in the Battle of Ashford. He had gone to war for duty, for loyalty, and to honor their liege lord and king. His body had not been returned and would never rest with his forebearers. Aaliyah, her closest friend, her confidant, her princess, was dead. Murdered in King's Landing along with her 2 babes. Aaliyah, sweet Aaliyah, made of Valyrian steel and twice as sharp, though everyone thought her made of glass. They had known one another since they were girls, and they were cousins to some close degree. Lady Alliandra Dayne Mardell, Ashara's mother, was first cousin to Miria Mardell, Aaliyah's mother. Ashara had held both of Aaliyah's children. Rhaenys was so much like her uncle Oberyn, so full of life and light and fire. Aegon was only a babe. What sort of monster murders babes? She wished that she had been in King's Landing longer so that she could have seen Rhaenys dance to her father's songs and Aegon's teeth begin to grow. Alas, she had been sent away as soon as her condition, her pregnancy with Alysanne, had become known. Aaliyah had dismissed her home so that she might not become a source of gossip in the court. Her father had forced her to remain sequestered within a select few rooms of Starfall so that her shame could be kept hidden. She had been forbidden to write to anyone about her pregnancy, as though that would make the condition disappear. By the time Alys had been born, the war had begun and she dared not name Alysanne's father. He was condemned to death, a traitor of the crown, until the usurper won his war with Ned Stark by his side. Would he have waited for her if he had known about Alys? Would he have killed Arthur? She felt nothing. Arthur couldn't be dead, he was the best sword in the world. Why would Ned kill Arthur? Why would Ned even be in Dorne? Why did he marry Catelyn Tully when he had promised to marry her? Why was her father dead? Why? She wondered how much time had passed between entering the solar which had been her father's to the time Lord Eddard Stark arrived. She had lost count of time when Daven entered the room and told her about the guests. Lord Eddard was accompanied by another man, 2 women, and an infant. Daven had escorted them to private rooms far from prying eyes. They had asked for a wet nurse for the babe, and the infant had been taken to Willa. Ashara acknowledged the steward's words and then asked for Lord Stark to enter the room. Eddard Stark entered and they were left alone. He was worn, tired, and covered in fine red dust from the Red Mountains. She saw the shadows in Ned's eyes, her Ned, and she wished that there was something inside of her which could feel anything. She wanted to love him, to touch him, to be told that nothing bad had happened since they had made Alys at Harrenhal. They did not speak as he approached and placed Don Arthur's sword, the sword of House Dayne, upon the desk before her. She touched the sword gingerly, biting back tears which threatened to fall. That was a funny thing, she did not remember when last she had cried. Was it when she had lost Ned or her father or Aaliyah and the babes? She did not know, for she had not felt anything in so very long. Did you kill him? She questioned quietly. She kept her eyes trained upon the blade, not wanting to make eye contact. She did not want to see him, not now. Yes, he answered eventually. She could hear the pain in his voice. Did he have a right to pain? Yes, she knew he did. He too had lost much. It was never supposed to be like this. He was guarding my sister. I would never have let harm come to her. They raised up their swords and we fought back. Only 2 of us survived the day. Your sister? She had nearly forgotten Lyanna Stark, the girl for whom a realm was destroyed. She looked up at him, seeing the anguish which lined his eyes and face. She's dead, he whispered. May the gods give them rest. Arthur had died as he had lived. He would have wanted nothing better. Why had he been guarding? And she knew, Arthur had said, only briefly and a few months passed, that he was doing his duty to his sovereign. How did she die? He shook his head. Asha, please. She snapped, cutting off his words. It was venom, the first emotion she had felt in many months other than when she felt peace holding her little girl. The babe is hers, isn't it? The color drained from his face. He's an infant, innocent of anything his parents did. The dragon's whore had a child, a cousin to her own Alysanne, a child who had been born while his own half-brother and sister were murdered beside their mother. She wanted to laugh or cry, she did not know which felt more appropriate. Why bring the bastard of the dragon's mistress here? That child will find no safety in Dorne. He sank into one of the chairs near her. I needed to see you, I needed to explain everything to you, I needed to return Sir Arthur's sword, I don't know what to do with him, I don't know what to do. She laughed, a bitter tone. I heard that you have married. His face displayed guilt, pain, at least he could feel something. Ashara, you're sorry. I know that during the war our families were on opposite sides, but do you really think an apology will heal the hurts I feel? My father is dead. My closest friend and her children are dead. My brother is dead at your hands. She laughed, nearly hysterical. I have a daughter, Ned. Alysanne is your firstborn. What will become of her? He placed his head in his hands and she stood. She was fury and he was nothing but shocked. A daughter, he seemed lost. Asha, I didn't know. There was no word of you after Harrenhal. I thought that you had forgotten me. Forgotten you? I gave you my virtue. I know, he muttered softly. What would you have me do? I am wed to Catelyn Tully. I can and will support you and the child. When she is of age, I will find a husband for her. Is that what you think I want? Money and a place to ship my child off to when she gets older. He looked at her in quiet confusion. I wanted a husband. I wanted a man who would love me and my daughter. I do love you. His voice broke and he shook his head. I wanted to marry you, Asha. I barely know my wife, but she is near to term with my child and may have already birthed the babe. Love me. She was overcome with a wave of emotion and sank to the ground in sobs. He knelt beside her and gathered her in his arms. He cried quietly against her as she sobbed loudly. The war had taken much away from both of them. Their fathers and brothers had both died for hopeless cause. He pulled her away gently and cupped her face in his hands. With his thumbs he wiped the tears from her eyes. She wiped his tears away with her own fingers. I would rather have married you, but I cannot change what has come to pass. The gods know that I would have gladly taken you to wife. I will always love you, Ashara, but I must do my duty to my wife. She gently kissed his lips on impulse. He kissed her back, tentative, emotional. She could have gladly died in his embrace. A part of her did die when he pulled away. I will always love you too, she whispered. He rested his forehead against hers. I am sorry for everything. Why did Arthur die? The words came from her mouth in hushed tones. He pulled away from her and rested his head in his hands again. He died to protect his king. His king. Rhaegar took my sister as a second wife. I do not know if she was wholly willing or not. Your brother died to protect the child from anyone, even his own uncle. I never would have hurt the boy. He is my nephew, my blood. I would never have any child killed. I hate what happened to Princess Alia's babes. She moved her head slowly, absorbing his words. My brother died doing his duty to his king. She laid a hand in his and squeezed. He held onto her hand as though she was his anchor. How will the child be kept safe? I don't know. I was considering taking him to Winterfell and claiming him as my bastard. She bowed her head, thoughtful. He could remain here. The words left her lips slowly, uncertainly. He stared at her in shock. How will he? She smiled thinly. Her brother had died to protect the boy. Her daughter was his cousin. It seemed a natural duty to protect the boy. We already have one child together, my lord. A second will not seem so strange. I have remained in seclusion this entire time, and none will realize differently save for one or two who are loyal to my family. He touched her cheek gently, and she leaned into his touch. Another child will destroy your reputation more than I have already done. Will you be safe here? I can convince Aaron to agree with me. Should Prince Doran have any questions, I will tell him the truth. They will support revenge if nothing else, although I do not know if they will believe he is legitimate. He pulled a crumpled letter from his vest. We burned all the other letters in the tower when we built the cairns for the dead. I saved this as proof. It is a letter from Princess Alia to Lyanna. Keep it if you will, so that someday the boy will know the truth. He passed her the letter and she read it slowly, memorizing and touching the words of her now deceased friend. She did not understand the letter entirely. She did not understand how Aaliyah could have known about Rhaegar and Lyanna and never speak a word to anyone. So many would be alive now if only so many things. She was in tears by the time she folded the letter and hid it in a pocket of her gown. "Have you thought of a name for the boy?" she asked when she was able to speak again. "Jon, I want to name him for Lord Arryn." She smiled weakly. "A good name, may I meet him?" He nodded. "Of course, my lady. What is our daughter's name?" "Alysanne," she replied. "Come with me and meet her." They walked from the room together, leaving Dawn upon the desk, the only witness of their conversation. They arrived in the nursery to find the nurse rocking Jon while Alysanne crawled along the floor. She pulled herself up and along the furnishings toward her mother. Ashara scooped her daughter into her arms and tossed the girl slightly, causing her to giggle merrily. "Lord Stark, meet your daughter." She passed the girl to Ned and he somewhat nervously held the little girl. She had her mother's violet eyes and dark thick hair. He smiled at her and she laughed. "Hello, Allies, I'm your father." She cooperated with his attentions for a minute before squirming to be passed back to her mother. Ashara kissed her daughter before placing her on the floor near her toys. The nurse handed Jon to Ashara and she looked at the newborn boy. He had gray eyes and dark hair, though he was too young for her to see any other features. Ashara supposed that the boy would be safe enough if she claimed the boy as her own. Any Targaryen features he might someday possess could be easily mistaken for Dayne traits. They will be raised as brother and sister Ned. House Dayne will protect the children. He responded without ever taking his eyes off of Allies. "Thank you for everything, Ashara. Will you take in my sister's maids who came here?" "Of course, Ned. Will your brother Aeron approve of these arrangements?" Aeron Dayne, Lord of Starfall and Ashara's eldest sibling, was at Sunspear. She knew that he would return soon with their youngest sister. She was certain that she could make him understand why she had taken in the boy. Arthur would have protected Jon, and so should they. She did worry over Aeron's friendship with Prince Oberyn Martell. The Red Viper of Dorne was restless since his sister's murder, and Prince Oberyn's friends were eager to begin fighting again. "Aeron will be perfectly fine with the news of my son's arrival." She could feel peace as she looked at the babe in her arms who looked up at her with sleepy, curious eyes. She looked to Ned and saw how warm his expression was toward her and the children. The war had brought so much death and pain, but perhaps here there could be a happier life for the children. Ashara may not have been able to be Lord Eddard's wife, but she could protect his secrets and their daughter. They dismissed the nurse and remained with the children for hours. Willa returned at one point to ensure that all was well and left food and drink, but otherwise Ashara and Ned spent the remainder of the day alone with the children. They spoke at length. They laughed. They wept. They kissed as though they would never touch again. Lord Eddard Stark and Lord Howland Reed tarried a fortnight at Starfall before beginning the long journey north. Leaving Ashara and the children was one of the hardest decisions that Ned had ever made, but he knew that his duty was elsewhere. Winterfell was his home, and the north was his to rule. His bride and their child were at Riverrun but would also make the journey north now that the war was ended. Many times during their stay and after departing from Starfall, the Lord of Winterfell tried to tell himself that he would never betray his vows to his bride. He told himself that he was a good and honorable man. However, a good, honorable man would never have had to make the decisions which he had made. He had taken Ashara's virtue and married another woman. He had killed the uncle to his own daughter. He was protecting the heir to the throne, a boy who would in all likelihood one day try to overthrow Eddard Stark's best friend. Eddard Stark was just a man. A good man but filled with faults. Ashara was his weakness. Ashara was his love and joy and shame. He had left her with child when he returned to the north. I have named him Arthur Sand, of course. His eyes are gray like yours and Jon's. Prince Oberyn said that I was like to have a brood to rival his own. I laughed at that suggestion. I have no interest in anyone but you, and you are in Winterfell with your bride and son. Congratulations upon the birth of your heir. I do wish for you to have many happy and healthy children with your bride. I know that she must hate me, but let her rest assured that I will remain in Dorne at Starfall with our children. I hope that these southern wolves of mine may meet your northern wolves one day. I know that is unlikely, but it is still a hope. Prince Oberyn has taken a liking to Jon. He hopes to train Jon in all manner of weapons as he grows older. He has promised to train Arthur as well. My brother Aeron is fully in favor of Prince Oberyn training Jon. They are also contemplating training dear allies with weapons. I have told them that they may train the boys to fight but not Alysanne. I am unconvinced that my request will be heeded. It seems that Lord Arryn was able to prevent Dorne from raising its banners against the Iron Throne in favor of the Prince Viceroys. I am grateful that we will have peace. Far too many lives dear and precious to us all have been lost in the war. I have happy news to report to you. Aeron is pledged to wed Marissa Kai. From what I have heard, she is a lovely young woman, younger than I am by 4 years. Aeron is 5 and 10 years her senior, but the match is a good one. The Kais have their seat at Sun House, which is not far from Starfall. They are sworn to Highgarden, but we shall not hold that against them. I am glad that Aaron will wed again. He has been terribly lonely since his first wife died. Hopefully Marissa will be able to produce an heir for House Dayne, as we are terribly lacking in legitimate heirs other than myself and my younger sister. There is much else that I would wish to say to you. For now I will wish you and your family good health. Know that myself and our children are well. With deepest affection, Ashara Dayne. Lord Aaron Dayne had been somewhere between terrified and furious when he learned about Jon upon his return to Starfall. He had wondered how she expected the child to go unnoticed. He had asked how she expected to keep Jon's true birth a secret, and she had scoffed at him. I have been kept in private apartments while our steward runs the affairs of Starfall, dear brother, she spat. Most of our staff are unaware that I have one child, and Ali's is over a year old. A second babe having been conceived during the war by the same man is hardly unusual. I don't understand how you could help Lord Stark of all people. He killed our brother. Our brother died to defend Jon. It is our duty to do the same. Besides, he is Ali's cousin. It will be good for them to be raised together. They had fought fiercely and he had called her any number of coarse names. In the end, however, he had agreed that their duty was to protect Jon. She had been correct in her assumption that the staff had little to no knowledge of her children. Of the servants who knew that Jon was not Ashara's, they found few issues. Daven, the steward, was born and raised at Starfall. His family had been in service to House Dayne for generations. He would keep any secret that was required of him. Willa had also been born and raised at Starfall, and she adored Jon. She treated him as though he was her own, though to a lesser degree than Ashara. The two handmaidens who had been Lyanna Stark seemed trustworthy enough, but they were strangers, and Jon was too big a secret to entrust to strangers. Ashara had forbidden them from leaving their room other than to assist with Jon. Aaron had not known what to do with them either, and maintained their restrictions. When Prince Oberyn Martell had been told the truth about Jon, he had taken them from Starfall. Neither Ashara nor Aaron ever asked what became of them. Telling Prince Oberyn Martell that Jon Sand was in truth Jon of House Targaryen had been a harrowing endeavor. He was able to discern that Jon was not Ashara's in an instant. He accused her and Aaron of protecting the child of the dragon's whore. It had taken Aaliyah's letter, which Ned had left behind, and a long discussion of Arthur Dayne's final wishes for the Red Viper to be appeased. His first action was to burn Aaliyah's letter for safety. His second act was to promise that Aaliyah would be avenged. He also swore to train Jon to fight, and he swore to keep the secret of his birth. Then, for a time, there was peace. Lord Arryn visited Dorne to plead for peace, and peace was secured. Dorne, in return, withdrew from the politics of Westeros. They learned quiet patience as House Baratheon strengthened itself in King's Landing. In secret, during the years of waiting, a pact was signed betrothing Jon of House Targaryen, King of the Andals, Rhoynar, and First Men, to Princess Arianne Martell. A watch was also kept on Prince Viserys and Princess Daenerys as they wandered the free cities. By the grace of the gods, Jon was protected and did not have to run in fear throughout Essos with his uncle and aunt. Westeros cared little for Dorne, and Dorne, with few exceptions, believed that Jon Sand was the son of Ashara Dayne and Eddard Stark. With 3 bastards claimed as hers to raise, Ashara Dayne was no longer so desirable to wed. Hopes for a legitimate heir to House Dayne lay with young Illyria, a mere girl, and Aaron if he remarried. So, as Lord of Starfall, Aaron sought a bride. He wed Marissa Kai of Sunhouse. Within 2 years she was with child. Lord Eddard Stark, I am pleased to hear that a daughter has been born to you and your wife, the Lady Catelyn. I hope that both mother and child are doing well. I also hope that your son Robb is growing hale and hearty. Our southern pack is doing well. They are growing too fast, Ned. Ali's is a brilliant young lady, though she is not yet 5 years old. She can already write simple words and do simple mathematics problems. I can hardly believe that she is so old. Has it truly been so long? She is overly fond of bossing around her little brothers, and as she is the eldest they follow her lead more often than not. She loves to run and the boys follow after her. She is fond of horses and lemons. They play in the lemon groves with Illyria almost every day. Ali's is also quite fond of our heart tree, as is Jon. Did I ever tell you that we have a heart tree at Starfall? I know that we spoke of the old gods when first we met. Being descended from the first men, we have had a genuine weirwood heart tree here for many long ages, when both of our ancestors were kings in their own kingdoms instead of vassal lords. It is in our lemon orchard of all places. It was never burned when the Andals arrived. I trust that you will find that bit of information interesting. It is difficult to teach the children which gods to follow. In Dorne we have such a strange combination of cultures. It may be easiest to teach them to follow the old gods and the 7. I would like to know what you want for them in that regard. Jon is fond of insisting that he can do anything. He insists that he lace his clothes, which I allow even though he is quite hopeless at it still. He is also quite insistent that I read to him 2 stories every night before he sleeps. I tell him endlessly of Princess Nymeria of the Rhoynar, and of Aegon the Conqueror. Alysanne prefers that I sing Alysanne to her, which I suppose is a result of my singing that to her when she was a babe. Arthur is learning to use a chamber pot on his own. It should not be long before he is fully trained, which is quite a relief. In other news, Aeron's wife is due in 4 months' time, so there will be an heir to House Dayne at last. I pray that this child survives. Aeron's first wife had many babes, but none lived longer than a moon's turn. Returning to our children, Prince Oberyn insists that they are old enough to hold small spears. Spears, Arthur is still a babe. I promise you that the idea of them ever fighting terrifies me. I hope that you will pardon the thought, but I think of my brother Arthur dying in battle whenever I see Aly's, Jon, or Arthur holding a wooden spear. I know that this letter is short. I have been rather busy of late in helping Aeron with our merchants. I know that it is selfish of me to say this, but I wish that you could visit the children. They adore their uncle, aunts, and the Martells, but they will want to know their father one day. I like to believe that you want to see them as well. Affectionately, Ashara Dayne. Lord Stark would not see his children and nephew again until Balon Greyjoy rose in rebellion against the Iron Throne. He came south in pursuit of Reavers, and once they were captured, continued on to Starfall. They docked at Starfall to rest and resupply. Lord Stark also felt that it was past time that he meet his son. Lord Eddard and his men were given lodgings within the castle upon their arrival. If any of the men had thought it strange to visit a place so far south, they did not speak out against their liege lord's commands. Ashara thought Ned Stark to be as handsome as the day she had first laid eyes upon him when he came to visit her and their children. His greeting was polite, cool, and courteous. He seemed nervous to be at Starfall again. The 3 children stood before her when they met, and she introduced them to him one by one. Alysanne, now nearly 7, was a miniature version of her mother. Her hair hung in a mass of dark curls down her back. Her eyes were dark purple with hints of light blue around the iris. Jon and Arthur resembled one another. The boys both had dark brown hair and gray eyes. Jon's build bore a stronger resemblance to his father, lean and tall with thin hair. But otherwise he was very much a Stark. Children, this is your father, Eddard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. The children all bowed to him as formally and politely as children can. Ashara noticed the tangible sadness which filled his eyes when he looked upon his children. I am pleased to meet all of you. I did have the pleasure of meeting the elder 2 of you some years ago when you were but babes. Mother says that you have other children too, Alysanne chirped. He smiled at her and knelt so that he was on level with the 3 children. Arthur clung back against his mother's skirt, but the other 2 stood closer to their lord father. I do. Robb and Sansa are your younger half-brother and half-sister. There will be another half-brother or sister born quite soon. Can we meet them? Alysanne questioned, she always the first to speak. He laid a gentle hand upon her cheek. I hope someday that you might, my sweet. I wish that I could spend more time with all of you. I must leave soon. For I am fighting in a war against a rebellious lord. I will spend time with all 3 of you while I am here. I am sorry that I have missed seeing all of you grow. May we write you father? Jon asked politely, biting his lip anxiously. Ned smiled and laid a hand on the boy's shoulder. You may write to me every day if you wish. I would enjoy hearing from all 3 of you. I shall write to you as well. He looked up to Ashara, eyes full of sorrow. Now I believe that I shall leave all of you for a short while to speak with your mother. The children complied, allowing him a hug and kiss before he stood and walking from the playroom with Lady Ashara. I have missed so much time with them, he said eventually. I remember holding Alysanne when she was still just a babe, and now she looks half a young lady. Would that we did not live on opposite sides of the country. His lips pressed together in a grim line. I think it wiser that we do. Cat and I are affectionate toward one another. But I think that she prefers to ignore my war children. War children, is that what they are? Ashara laughed at the notion. He gave a non-committal shrug. I think that if it were just Alysanne she could forgive me. Perhaps she would even allow a visit from both of you. Alysanne was conceived at Harrenhal when Cat was betrothed to Brandon. Jon and Arthur, on the other hand, she sees them as a threat to Robb. Do you really think that I would put my sons up against their half-brother? He took her hands and looked her in the eyes. No, I do not. My wife does. I will respect her by not bringing more conflict into Winterfell that I have already been responsible for. She sighed. I want them to know their brother and sister. I want them to know you. They are your children. He kissed her hands. I want to know them. I want to know what stories they listen to at night. I want to know the songs they sing. I want to know their favorite colors. Alysanne loves green. Jon's favorite color is white. Arthur's favorite color at the moment is red. She smiled sadly at him and his eyes were clouded with sadness again. She caressed his cheek gently. Spend time with them, my love. A week of rest for you and your men will also give you time to spend with all of them. Be grateful that Prince Oberyn is not here for a change. He has taken to teaching Jon everything he knows about weapons. Ned's eyes narrowed at her. He knows, doesn't he? She gave him a slow nod of her head. For years now, he is training Jon for the future. What future? I am fighting for House Baratheon against a rebel house. The Martells need to let their vendetta die before it kills us all. She glared at him. You are the one who left me with the children to raise alone. You are the one who gave me the responsibility to keep them safe. I am doing the best I can to raise them, protect them, and guide them. All the while you get to stay in Winterfell with your Riverlands bride. Are you happy with her? Do you love her? Or is she just your duty? I love you both, he whispered quietly. She pressed her lips to his, wanting him to respond. He hesitated at first and then responded with an equal passion. He followed her willingly to her chambers that day and the days that followed. He spent his days with the children and nights with her. If Lord Eddard Stark's men noticed their liege lord's indiscretions, they did react outwardly while at Starfall. When he left, Lord Ashara Dayne and his men followed. When the Greyjoy rebellion ended, Lord Eddard Stark returned to Winterfell with Theon Greyjoy as his ward. Lord Ashara Dayne never returned. He died off the coast of Pike, leaving his young son Edric as the Lord of Starfall. Lucas Sand was born 9 months after Lord Stark left Starfall. Jon. Alysanne had been pounding on his door and calling his name for some minutes, but Jon Sand was far too comfortable to bother leaving his bed. When she did not tire of trying to rouse his attention, he made to move from the bed. His movement was stopped by a pair of very strong legs pinning his own to the bed. Tyene, I need to answer the door before Alice knocks it down. The blonde viper unburied her face from the pillows of Jon's bed and slowly opened her eyes. She was by far one of the most enticing women Jon had ever seen and the first to have entered his bed. Their trysts had begun a moon past, and he did not like to think upon them ending any time soon. She gazed at him with a predatory smile. Then she could join us. Jon made a face at that. Tyene's tastes in bed partners was something that Jon had yet to comprehend. I have no interest in sharing my bed with my own sister. She shrugged, the silk sheet falling off her body. You could watch. She laughed merrily and untangled herself from him. He felt that he could watch Tyene forever, but not with Alice. He grudgingly got out of the bed and pulled on his trousers before opening the door for his sister. She pushed her way inside and handed him a paper. A letter from father. He is coming south to be the hand of the king. Jon sat down near the window to read the letter. Lord Stark is coming south, Tyene asked from across the room. She had yet to bother leaving the bed or covering herself in the slightest. He said that he should arrive in King's Landing in a month's time. Alice replied. He says that he will visit us a few months after he has been settled in King's Landing. Tyene laughed. I am certain that Lady Stark will love that. Will your father give you yet another brother when he comes to visit? Alysanne gaped at the Viper's daughter. Tyene stood and found a robe to drape herself in. Are you really so shocked, Alice? It seems every time Lord Stark and Lady Ashara meet another Sand is born. Jon let out a snorting laugh. She is right, Alice. How else do you explain Lucas? Alysanne sighed in defeat. I am just happy that we can see father again. Lucas has never met father, and I only barely remember his visit during the Greyjoy rebellion. We could see father if we ever just rode north to visit. That earned derisive looks from Alice and Tyene. Oh yes, that would go over well when we pass through the Riverlands. Oh, pay no mind to us, we are just the children of Lord Stark, but not the ones who have Tully blood. Then we would arrive at the gates of Winterfell after months of travel to find a warm welcome from our father whom we don't know, our half-siblings whom we have never met, and their mother who surely hates our very existence. I think I would enjoy seeing that. Tyene gave them her most angelic smile. You should ride with us to King's Landing when our father arrives, Jon offered. She shook her head. Father has forbidden us from leaving Dorne. And mother has forbidden us from leaving as well. Jon gave her a condescending smirk. I have left before. I went with Prince Oberyn to Old Town just last month. Alysanne walked to the bed, grabbed a pillow and threw it at his head. He caught the pillow and laughed. Don't blame me for being one of the prince's squires. Mother prefers having all of us here, and as a girl you are like to leave last. Tyene tusked at him. She is trained beside myself and my sisters. She wields a sword better than Arthur, and rides better than you. Maybe my father should take her for a squire. Alice giggled helplessly at the shock which spread across Jon's face. He had not expected his lover to say his sister should replace him at Prince Oberyn's side. He may need to replace me with Jon anyway if he learns what the two of you have been up to lately. Tyene tossed her hair over one shoulder casually. Father already knows. He has never been too concerned with whom my sisters or I take as paramours. If anyone would try to harm us, then they would not live long. She took several long strides toward Alysanne. I told Jon that you should join us and he refused. Alice wrinkled her nose in disgust. He's my brother Tyene, that's just wrong. The blonde gave a defeated sigh. It was worth asking, will you join me in the training yard later? Of course, I will be there in 2 hours. I still need to show the letter to Lucas. I will look forward to our sparring. She ran a gentle hand along Alisanne's arm and gave Jon a parting kiss before leaving the chamber. Alice rolled her eyes. She is incorrigible. She's beautiful. She will leave your bed soon enough for someone else's. Jon knew what his sister was saying was true, but he did not want to think upon the eventual future. She is free to do as she pleases, the same as you or I. Do you think that mother will let us visit father in King's Landing? She shook her head uncertainly, her mass of dark, thick curls waving with the motion. I doubt it. She would tell us to wait here until he comes to visit us. You know how much she worries after all of us. Her desert wolves. I would like to meet the northern wolves. Snow wolves, he said with a laugh. She laughed as well. Can you imagine calling our brothers and sisters snow wolves? Their mother would die of embarrassment, I think. In a mocking, high-pitched tone he added, Snow is the northern bastard name and these children are true-born Starks of Winterfell. Her laughter quieted after a while. I wonder what they are like. We only know their names and ages. We don't know anything else about them. He frowned too. They probably don't know much more about us either. Here, take the letter and show Lucas. I have to get dressed and eat before we spar later. She took the letter from him and left to find their youngest brother. Of the 4 children, Alisanne was the only one with any memory of the man they called father. She could remember a tall, stern, gray-eyed man who picked her up in his arms and spun her around. Alice could also remember a man with dark hair and violet eyes. Mother said that the man with violet eyes was her Uncle Aaron, Edric's father. Both men had been gone from their lives for 9 years. He wrote to them regularly. They wrote to him just as often, but writing a letter and being held by a father were 2 very different things. The men who were their models for how a father should be were Prince Oberyn and Prince Doran Martell. Oberyn trained Jon and Arthur to exhaustion on a regular basis. Their intense training shown in their skill with sword, lance, and bow. Alisanne knew that Jon and Arthur would become everything their Uncle Arthur had been. Doran was kinder and gentler than Oberyn. He spoke with them for hours when they visited the water gardens. He taught them to play Syves when they finally learned to have patience. That afternoon, Jon, Alisanne, Arthur, Tyene, Edric, Lucas, and Sorella trained in archery and spear throwing. Spears were never Tyene's strong point, but she played willingly for a little while. Sorella's throws and arrows never missed the targets and she won the competition. Arthur was second best for archery, followed closely by Alisanne and Jon. Jon was second best with the spear. Tyene and Sorella merely watched when their shooting and throwing competition ended and the others began to fight with tourney swords. Edric and Lucas sparred one-on-one, but the elder 3 did not. They had stopped doing one-on-one swordplay years before. Instead, the eldest 3 desert wolves fought as a free-for-all. Hacking, slashing, dancing, parrying, the 3 moved in a rhythm that was all their own. Jon nearly always won their matches, even when Arthur and Alisanne teamed up to defeat their brother. Jon moved his blade faster and more deftly than any of the rest. The only sparring partner Jon had who could defeat him regularly was Prince Oberyn. Alice believed that someday Jon would be the best knight in all the 7 kingdoms. She believed that someday songs would be sung about Sir Jon Sand. He defeated her first and then moved his fight to Arthur. Suddenly, Edric and Lucas turned from their match and charged toward Jon. Jon disarmed their cousin, the Lord of Starfall, first. He quite nearly defeated his remaining brothers, but Lucas tripped him and won the day. Tyene, Sorella, and Alisanne laughed and clapped for the victory of Lucas and Arthur over Jon. You cheated, he declared with a laugh. You're dead, so you cannot complain, Arthur said with a smirk. There is no cheating in a free-for-all, Lucas added. Jon shook his head in defeat. Then I will admit defeat. But only for today. Arthur reached out a hand and helped Jon off the ground. You are still the best sword amongst us. You just need to learn to be the best sword when the odds are overwhelmingly against you. So I have been told, he muttered darkly. Your father is a harsh taskmaster, he told Tyene and Sorella. We know, they replied in unison. Within the month, Tyene and Sorella both left Starfall for whatever adventure next struck their fancy. Near the end of the month, Lord Barristan Selmy went north with Edric to participate in the Tournament of the Hand in King's Landing. That same evening, the household realized that Jon and Arthur were missing. Ned hated everything about King's Landing. He hated the heat. He hated the politics. He hated leaving Catelyn and the children. Even his friend, King Robert, was wearing on him. He knew that he needed to find answers to Jon Arryn's death. He needed to know the truth about why someone tried to murder Bran. Yet truth, it seemed, was nearly impossible to find in King's Landing. Littlefinger pointed Ned and Catelyn toward the Lannisters for the attack on Bran. Truth be told, even Ned found the Lions to be suspect. The problem was a lack of proof. Yes, they had a knife and a dead assassin, but that was hardly proof enough. so to his ever-increasing ire, Eddard Stark served as Hand of the King. Were it his will, he would have gone south to visit his children and then returned home to Winterfell. Were it his will, his bastards would have been able to visit him at Winterfell. Out of respect for Catelyn, his children with Ashara would not be permitted to visit Winterfell while Catelyn lived. He would not pain Catelyn with their presence. Their very existence hurt her more than he would ever be able to amend. He had made 1,000 mistakes in his relationship with Catelyn Tully, the greatest of those being Lucas Sand. He had not meant to touch Ashara when he visited Starfall during the Greyjoy Rebellion. He was there to rest, resupply, and visit the children. A million excuses for his actions would still just be excuses. Ashara Dayne was a weakness for him. A fire filled him whenever they met, and he had never been strong enough to resist her. He had no reason to resist Ashara at Harrenhal when he was young and unattached. They pledged their love and promised marriage. They made Alysanne in love. He had not wanted to resist her at Starfall after the war. Filled with grief, anger, and loss, they comforted one another. They kissed, wept, and made love as though they would never touch again. Arthur, named for the uncle Ned had slain, was made in emotional turmoil. He had not been strong enough to resist his attraction to her during the Greyjoy Rebellion. Being near her and the children made him long for the life he could have had. They made love in the dark of night to hide their sins. She did not write to him about their newest son until Catelyn was near to term with Bran. Ned hid the truth for near on a year until Catelyn found some of the letters regarding Lucas. Lucas, made in lust, was the rift which would never fully heal between Eddard and Cat. He could see the hurt and anger flowing through Cat whenever his bastards were mentioned, so they were rarely ever mentioned, even to his true-born children. Robb, Sansa, and Arya were aware that there were 4 children in the south who were their half-siblings. Bran knew to a lesser extent, and Rickon was ignorant to their existence. Catelyn's fury had multiplied when he went south, even though it had been at her request and the king's command. She raged that he would go see his southern whore. That was one of the few instances in the whole of their marriage when Ned could recall Cat raising her voice in anger toward him. He never blamed her for being so angry at him. He knew that her venom was well-deserved. Somewhere, somehow. Amid all the hurt, betrayal, and lies, Eddard Stark had come to love Catelyn Tully. Ever since Rickon's birth, he believed that she had truly come to love him as well. They would smile and laugh together. She would run a soothing hand across his shoulders in passing when they were too busy with the affairs of the day to speak. There were days, many days in fact, when Catelyn would call him my love for any to hear. She was a better woman than he would ever deserve. She was a better woman than his brother Brandon would have deserved had he lived and wed Cat. For all the follies Ned had committed, Brandon's were still notorious. Then there was Jon, his sister's son whom he had claimed as his own and then left behind. Initially, Ned had told himself that he had left Jon purely for the child's safety. While Jon truly was safe with Ashara, from what Ned had seen and from every letter he had received. A fair amount guilt weighed upon Ned from his choice to leave the boy behind. Ned came to accept that he had left Jon because he did not want to be reminded of what the child represented. Jon was the foolishness of Lyanna and the madness of the Targaryens. Jon was the result of decisions which had taken the lives of Brandon and Rickard Stark. Jon was the result of decisions which had ripped apart the future Ned had dreamed of with Ashara. It was all so incredibly wrong. From the path Lyanna had taken to the decisions Ned had made, there was little good to be seen. Eddard Stark often wondered if he had truly ever been a good man. He wondered when he had become the person who hurt everyone whom he loved and who loved him. The only promise he had kept was to Lyanna, but even that was Ashara's doing. Today was a matter that Ned found to be a waste of time and money, the tournament of the hand being held in his honor. Sansa was simply delighted with the idea of a joust. She adored the tales of knights, tournaments, and heroes. Ned never wanted to see the day when she would realize how flawed heroes were. Arya had little interest in the tourney and was planning to spend her days dancing. His youngest daughter had not confessed who had given her needle, but he strongly suspected Robb of indulging her passion for swords. Sansa watched the knights and riders enter the tournament field with joy and wonder. She recognized the Kingsguard, Lord Royce, her father's men from Winterfell, and many others. There were also many riders whom Sansa did not know. At the very end of the line of riders to enter the field were 2 riders who wore their helms with their visors down. Their armor was finely wrought but bore no emblem. The shields they carried bore 3 solid bands, purple and gray divided by white. Mystery Knights, everyone seemed to whisper. Sansa gasped in delight. Sansa's attentions were fixed upon Sir Loras Tyrell and the 2 Mystery Knights. The Mystery Knights rode as though they were born atop a horse. Both were swift to unhorse their renowned competitors. Sir Jaime Lannister finally defeated the shorter of the 2 Mystery Knights after 4 passes on the field. He fell to the ground with a loud, clanging thud. Sansa clutched her hands to her chest in fear. Sir Jaime, ever chivalrous, dismounted and offered a hand to his competitor. Once he was standing, the boy, for indeed he was just a boy of scarce a year or so older than Sansa, removed his helm. Sansa stared at him long and hard. He had dark, thick hair and a long face. He was too far away for her to make out many details of his looks, but she found him to have a kind face. He laughed with Sir Jaime for a few moments before limping from the field. Sansa was glad that the boy was unharmed. She hoped that he would fight in the other tournaments. Young men who entered the list were certain to have songs written of them, she was certain of that. The other Mystery Knights succeeded in unhorsing and injuring the Mountain. In their first pass, the Mystery Knight slid on his saddle, away from the blow of Sir Gregor. During their second pass he hit the massive knight in the arm and the splintered lance slid up under the armor. The Mountain fell with a horrendous shout and blood pouring from beneath his arm. He walked angrily from the field. Sansa was glad that he was injured since he had killed the boy earlier in the day. Near the day's end the final four were known. Sir Jaime Lannister, Sandor Clegane, Sir Loras Tyrell and the Mystery Knight would joust on the morrow. Sansa's heart was torn between wishing for Sir Loras's victory or for the gallant Mystery Knight. As Sansa and Septa Mordane walked to the feast, they were met by the two Mystery Knights. Sansa was certain that the boys were the knights, for she remembered the face of the shorter boy. Their armor was gone, replaced by plain clothes of gray, white and violet. "My lady," the elder of the boys began. His appearance was similar to the younger boy, but he was taller and leaner. His eyes were darker as well, though Sansa could not make out the color of either boy's eyes in the light of the moon and torches. "I was told that you are from House Stark." Her eyes widened and her pulse quickened. A Mystery Knight had asked about her. She smiled. "I am Sansa of House Stark. Are you all right? I was terribly worried when you fell." She addressed her question to the younger of the boys. He gave her a brief smile and then winced. "A few bruises, my lady. It is nothing to fret over." "That's wonderful," she exclaimed. She did not notice her Septa's frown. "May I ask your names?" The taller boy grinned. "Jon, Arthur, do you have houses?" Sansa may have been just a young girl, but she could tell that the boys were not just commoners. "Sansa, it is impolite to ask so many questions," the Septa scolded. "We are supposed to be at the feast." If they don't want to answer me, then they won't," she pouted. "We are brothers, my lady," Jon replied. His eyes danced with humor. "We represent two houses. I shall win the tournament tomorrow and tell you more then." They bowed politely to her and then took their leave. With all her heart, Sansa wished to know whom the boys truly were. The tales of two Mystery Knights riding in the tournament was all that anyone was speaking about the next morning before Eddard arrived at King Robert's tent. Even Robert mentioned them when he asked Ned whom he thought the victor would be. "Mystery Knights here? I thought that nonsense ended ages ago." Ned shook his head. "As long as there are young men trying to prove something, there will be tournaments and Mystery Knights." The king laughed. "You're right there, Ned. The one the Kingslayer knocked down was young boy. Probably thinks he's the next Barristan the Bold." "How old is he?" The king took a swig of ale and laughed heartily. 12 or so. Old enough to think himself a hero and too young to know better. The other one might be older, but he never took off his helm where anyone could see. Injured Gregor Clegane fairly well too. I am sure Tywin Lannister will not be pleased to hear how his lapdog was wounded. Ned could not honestly say that he felt any amount of pity for the man who was called the Mountain. Especially not after he had killed Sir Hugh of the Vale. A fear crept inside, tugging at the worry in his mind. There was one house in particular that would have a vendetta against Gregor Clegane, the same house that his son squired for House Mardell. What colors did they wear? He scratched at his beard for a moment. Purple, white, and gray banded on their shields. Ned swore loud enough to shock his oldest friend. "They're my sons, my bastards." Recognition dawned upon Robert's face. The children with Lady Ashara. Are they truly old enough to be fighting in a tournament? In Ned's opinion, they were not, but he had given full responsibility of the children to Ashara. It seems that they believe so. He laughed at Ned's gravity. "I'll never understand how you were lucky enough to get between her legs." "Lucky, Ned, two of the most beautiful women in the world, and they chose you." Lucky was not the word Ned would have used to describe the path his life had taken. "Catelyn married me because her father willed it." Ashara. He had felt like he was walking on air when he first met Ashara. She had been the bold one and he had been shy. They danced together for hours. They talked, they laughed, and they kissed. There were moments when she was the most proper woman he had ever met and moments when she was completely scandalous. By the end of the tournament, they promised to wed and had made love at least 10 times. Ashara and I were young and believed that love was all that mattered. Married to the wrong woman. "I never said that. I love Cat. She is a far better woman than I deserve. But she wasn't what you wanted nor what you were supposed to have like me." Ned nodded solemnly but did not truly agree. Yes, had everyone lived and married whom they were supposed to marry, then Robert would have married Lyanna, Brandon would have married Cat, and Ned could have married Ashara. In truth, Lyanna, however much Robert adored her, would never have married him. If Rhaegar had not come along, she would have found someone else to run away with, of that Ned was certain. That was Lyanna, his beautiful, willful sister. Ashara and Catelyn were nothing like Lyanna. Between the two, Ashara was the more impulsive, the less proper, but she still understood propriety. He had only bedded her once they promised to wed. Catelyn was a duty, honor, and loyalty. She married whom her father chose. She did not complain when life was not what she had chosen. After so many years with Catelyn, it was her that he wanted at the end of the day until the day he died. He would most likely have loved Ashara just as deeply, but that did not mean he had married the wrong woman. You have any other bastards in that frozen north of yours? He shook his head. How many times had Cat asked him that very question? No, I have 5 children with Catelyn and 4 with Ashara. He had not counted Jon to his panic. I have not met Lucas, so I do forget to count him sometimes. How many are you up to? He questioned the king with a grin, and Robert burst out laughing. Only the gods know that answer, Ned. They spent the rest of the morning joking and reminiscing about their youth in the Eyrie. By the time Eddard arrived at the tournament, Sansa's attention was fixed solely upon the riders. Would his daughter adore the Mystery Knight as much if she knew that he was one of the boys her mother despised? He shook the thought from his mind as Jon took the field against Loras Tyrell. The Knight of Flowers was skilled, and won the adoration of the crowd with his silver armor which dazzled with sapphires. Jon's armor was plain and well-fashioned. It was his riding that took everyone, including Ned's, breath away. The boy rode his sand steed as though they were one with the wind. They struck blows on the first pass, but neither was unhorsed. Ned grasped the armrests of his chair so hard that it felt as though the wood was like to splinter. This was Lyanna's son. He did not want the boy injured. On the second pass, Jon hit Sir Loras's shield hard enough that his lance splintered and the Tyrell boy's shield cracked. Sansa gasped in fear. She adored Loras Tyrell for the rose he had given her and adored the Mystery Knight for the sake of his being a Mystery Knight. They led their horses around for a third pass. Both men hunched low in their seats, holding their lances true. Jon hit his opponent's shield in the same spot as before, and the Knight of Flowers flipped backward off of his horse, landing on his back. Sansa held one hand to her heart and the other to her mouth, quite nearly in tears. Jon dismounted, gave a hand to the other boy, and Loras stood. The roar of the crowd was enormous as the two men walked off the field for the next match. The match was close between Jaime Lannister and Sandor Clegane. The Hound rode hard and fast. Lannister rode just as well, and in the end it was the Kingslayer who won the round. Ned's stomach churned at the sight of the Kingslayer riding against Jon. What would Lannister do if he knew who the boy he was riding against really was? Would he kill Jon on the spot? Would he bend the knee to the son of the prince whom he had once served? Ned wished that Jon had never come to King's Landing. His presence was dangerous, too dangerous. As the two men broke lance after lance against one another, Ned could see the ghosts who rode with Jon. With him was the impulsive spirit that inhabited Brandon and Lyanna. With him was Rhaegar's finesse. With him was Arthur Dayne's skill. With him was Oberyn Martell's training. On their sixth pass, Jon feinted with his lance, changing its positioning at the last moment and knocking Sir Jaime clean off his mount. The cheer from the crowd was deafening. As he had done with Sir Loras, Jon dismounted and offered his hand to his opponent. The men shook hands after Lannister was standing, and Jon removed his helm. The boy was grinning, and Sir Jaime laughed at the words which passed between the two. They walked together the stands. "A new Barristan the Bold," Sir Jaime announced when they were close enough to be heard by Ned and Robert. "He has yet to tell me his name, but said that he had to unhorse me to avenge his younger brother." Jon's dark gray eyes shone his amusement. Ned could still see traces of the young boy he had met years before in his face. There were traces of both his parents in his face, though Ned knew what to look for to see Rhaegar and Jon. "My name is Jon, your grace," he told the king. "I wanted to win today for my father, your lord hand." Ned could see Sansa's eyes widen in shock as she looked between himself and Jon. Lannister's face was such a display of surprise that Ned wanted to laugh aloud. Instead, Ned stood and took a few steps toward the boy who called him father. "You rode well today, Jon. Where is your brother Arthur?" Jon grinned sheepishly. "With Lord Dondarrion. We were not supposed to leave Dorne, but we wanted to meet you. Allies will be furious. Lord Dondarrion is Aunt Illyria's betrothed and Edric is his squire. He noticed us yesterday, so we are staying in his tents. He would have sent us back to Dorne, but we told him that we would not leave before seeing you." With a laugh and a shake of his head, Ned embraced the young man. "It is a pleasure to see you. Sansa, I would like you to meet Jon Sand, one of your half-brothers." The girl stood and gave a polite curtsy. It is a pleasure to meet you again. You and Arthur ride well. He gave her a bow. You have my thanks, dear sister. My brother's sister and I have looked forward to meeting our northern brothers and sisters for many years. She stared wide-eyed at him for several moments before forming a reply. We do not speak much of you at Winterfell. Mother gets angry. Sometimes father allows us to read letters that each of you has written. Will you and Arthur participate in the other competitions today? The fear that had been subsiding gripped Ned's heart again when Jon affirmed her question. We both plan to participate in the archery and melee competitions. Arthur is the best archer in Dorne and I have yet to meet a better sword than myself, Jon boasted. Sir Jaime, who had moved beside the king, heard the boast and laughed. Then you have not held a sword against me. A hint of anger flashed through Jon's eyes. I bested you with a lance. Fight in the melee and prove those words. He gave a smile but shook his head. Not today, but maybe one day we can spar against each other. I will look forward to that day, good sir. Their words ended and the whole assembly walked together to the archery grounds. Sansa stood quietly by her father's side, her revelry more subdued. Sure enough, Arthur Sand was the best archer of the day, narrowly besting a young man named Anguy from the Dornish marches. To Ned's terror and even Sansa's trembling, both boys competed in the melee. It was a long, brutal match. Fingers were broken, cuts were given, and the two boys who called Ned father swung their swords with ease. While many of the men grunted and snarled, the desert wolves laughed. Again, Eddard could see the ghosts who fought beside the boys. Prince Rhaegar and Sir Arthur Dayne, side by side, cutting down their foes. They fought well, but in the end it was Thoros of Myr who won the melee. Afterward, the boys were given seats at the feast. As victors of the joust and archery contests, as well as being the sons of the hand of the king, Eddard was certain that there would be issues with his bastards having seats at the high table, so their seats were arranged amongst the lesser guests at the feast. Upon having refreshed themselves, Ned and his 4 children withdrew to a private area to speak. Sansa and Arya were rather subdued throughout the feast. The knowledge that their half-brothers were present was rather distracting. Arya even forgot her pride over the bruise on her leg which she had received during her dancing lessons with Syrio. She picked at her food, anxious to meet half of the siblings which she had never met. What were they like? Did they want to meet her? Would they like a little sister who wasn't pretty, had messy hair and could wield a sword? Or would they only like Sansa, pretty, perfect Sansa? When the feast was nearing its conclusion, their father asked them to come with him. They walked quietly behind him knowing that he was leading them to their brothers. Arya twisted her skirt in her hands. The boys stood up from the table before they were close and approached with smiles. Their father turned to introduce Arya when they were all together. Jon, Arthur, I would like you to meet your youngest sister, Arya. The taller boy, Jon, resembled father and herself. Arthur did not have the same long, Stark face, but still somewhat resembled a Stark, more than most of Arya's full-blooded brothers and sister. It is a pleasure to meet you, Lady Arya, Jon greeted with a smile. I'm not a lady, she spat quickly but not unkindly. Sansa looked mortified, but Arya could swear that she saw a twinkle in her father's eyes. The boys laughed. She's our sister all right, Arthur chuckled. She looks like you did when we were children, although she is much prettier than you are. Of course our sisters are beautiful, Jon replied. From every account, our mother and theirs are 2 of the most beautiful in all of Westeros. Arya's eyes went wide. People never called her beautiful with the exception of father, but he did not count. Sansa blushed prettily beside her. She was never one to avoid compliments. Their father cleared his throat. I was hoping that we might all speak more privately. Of course, father. Jon responded. Lord Dondarrion's tents are nearby, and that is where Arthur and I are staying. Jon took Sansa's arm and Arthur took Arya's as they walked toward the tents. Forgotten was any apprehension Arya had about meeting her half-siblings. Arya quickly discovered that Arthur had a talent for making her laugh. She had been quiet and serious until he began to make the most ridiculous faces at her. Brothers, 2 more brothers to get to know. Arya had known about her half-siblings for a few years, and had written to them irregularly. Meeting them, however, was not something she had really considered. Mother never wanted them to be mentioned, so they seldom were ever spoken about. Arya always assumed that they could never come to Winterfell. Arya wondered why her mother hated her half-brothers and half-sister so much. Arya also wondered why her mother hated crooked stitches, torn dresses, and Arya wanting to fight with swords. They arrived at Lord Berick's tents a short time later and were greeted warmly by the guards of houses Dayne and Dondarrion. Jon led them all into one of the large tents. There were 2 chairs in the tent which the girls were offered and accepted. Jon and Arthur took seats upon one cot and Lord Stark sat upon another cot. Welcome to our temporary home, Arthur announced as he sat. Why were you not around to watch our games today and yesterday? Arya flushed. She had been practicing with Syrio, something which Sansa did not know about. I have dancing lessons. What sort of dance do you learn? Jon inquired. Bravosi water dancing. To her horror, both of the boys laughed. Sansa regarded them strangely, uncertain of why they were laughing. That is a type of dance we know well, Jon replied. Tell me, are a fast learner? Arya beamed. I think so most days anyway. Syrio is a good trainer. He is teaching me how to really see what people are doing. He is teaching me to be a sword. A sword? Sansa questioned in confusion. Arya clapped a hand over her mouth as the boys laughed and their father smiled. Bravosi water dancing is a style of sword fighting, he answered. It was Sansa's turn to cover her mouth in shock. Arya, I am betrothed to the prince. What would people think if they knew my sister was learning to use a sword? Sweetling, I am the one who hired her trainer. If your sister is happy and you are happy, then I am content. I do not concern myself with the whisperers in the court. They spend far too much time gossiping and far too little time concerning themselves with their own problems. Yes, father, she murmured in reply. They shifted in awkward silence for a few moments before Arthur broke the ice again. Arya, would you like to practice with our cousin Edric? He is not much older than yourself and is also trained in that style of sword fighting. Yes, may I, father? As long as Lord Beric is amenable to the idea of his squire joining you, I see no harm in the idea. Thank you. Edric trains with our brother Lucas. Jon and I train with our sister Alysanne. Alysanne fights with a sword? Arya asked. She's almost as good as Jon. Have no fear, Sansa, she is also a lady. Sansa's cheeks nearly matched the color of her hair. I did not mean to offend anyone. There is no offense, sweet sister, Jon offered. I am certain that our Dornish ways are quite unusual to our northern kindred. We would love to know both of you more and have wished for many years to meet you and our brothers. I'm glad that you are here, Arya responded before an uncomfortable silence fell again. I miss my brothers. Bran woke up, but he wasn't able to say goodbye to us when we left Winterfell. The boys tensed. What happened? They asked as one. Lord Stark's lips pressed together in a grim line. He fell from one of the towers of Winterfell. He was unconscious for some time but has now awoken. He will never be able to walk again. Arthur looked between his father and sisters. I am terribly sorry to hear that. Hopefully we may meet him as well one day. Their father's answer was not the most positive of replies. We will see what can be done, my son, was all he said. Arthur inclined his head somewhat sadly but pressed on. All of you and our brothers are welcome to visit us at Starfall whenever you wish. As future queen, it would be good for you to become acquainted with Dorne. Sansa's normally impeccable manners were not quite made for her present situation. She stared wide-eyed at her half-brothers for some time. I believe that you are correct. It would be a pleasure to visit Dorne and Starfall whenever father believes is appropriate. It was their father's turn to shift awkwardly in his seat. We will discuss that later. The night wore on in much the same manner. They spoke in short bursts and then faded into uncomfortable silence. When Lord Beric arrived with Edric, the conversation was easier and less focused on their unusual family situation, and more on swords and Dorne. In the end, it was decided that Lord Dondarrion and the boys would remain in King's Landing for a few more weeks, so that they might all spend time with one another. The following morning, they settled into an inn near the Red Keep. Their time of peacefully getting acquainted was rather short-lived. 2 days after the Tournament of the Hand ended, word reached King's Landing that Tyrion Lannister was being held captive by Catelyn Stark. That same evening, Sir Jaime Lannister attacked Lord Stark and his men. All of men who had been accompanying Lord Eddard that day were killed and Ned's leg was broken. If not for Lord Beric and Vayon Poole, Arthur and Jon would have chased after Sir Jaime when he fled the city. Instead, they waited beside their father's bed until he awoke. Every day they trained harder than ever, and swore to kill the Kingslayer. They shared the midday meal as they had every year for nearly 15 years. While Ashara Dayne and Oberyn Martell ate many meals together throughout the year, one day of the year was different from all the others. Aaliyah's name day was their special day to meet with one another, to reflect and remember the one who had been taken from them. They always met in the same room that day of the year. The room was modestly sized, with a large balcony overlooking the orchards and the sea beyond. There was no room in Starfall that Aaliyah Martell had loved more. Why did Illyria not come with you this time? Ashara asked as she stirred her soup. Across the table sat Prince Oberyn sipping wine from a silver goblet. He lowered the cup and sighed. She prefers to leave me to my own devices on this day. When you and I reminisce, she feels out of place. She does not share our history. And she never met my sister. Ashara bowed her head with understanding. I worried that she was more concerned with your affection for me. He favored her with a throaty laugh. She understands my ways just as you do. Yes, but she is bastard-born and I am not. What would your sister think of what I am now, I wonder? She would bid us marry, of that I am certain. A woman with so many bastards, she smirked mischievously. To a man with so many bastards, a perfect match. They laughed heartily, and he reached across the table to hold her hand. She should still be here with us. Her smile dropped, replaced by a tangible sorrow. I still miss her. I remember the first time the two of you came here. The way the three of us ran through the castle and orchards. I believe that our mothers were somewhere between amused and horrified at our antics. Then they sequestered us in here one day. She looked around the room, remembering their youth. I can still remember her laughter in this room. She loved the scent of the lemon trees mixing with the salt air. Even when we were on Dragonstone, she would talk about how much she loved this room. We will avenge her soon. His black eyes narrowed. His voice was hushed and low. She pulled her hand from his and stood. She walked stiffly to the balcony. He followed behind her. You mean to use my sons to avenge her? She crossed her arms at her chest and stared firmly at the horizon. He ran a hand along her back. From neck to waist. Jon is not your son, he hissed in her ear. He is my son. I sang him to sleep. I kissed his bruises. I watched over him when he was sick. She turned to face him, eyes blazing. Do not tell me that he is not mine. He placed his hands on her shoulders and held her tightly. He will be our king one day. That has always been the plan. I have trained your sons to be warriors, and they will fight the coming war. Their running away to King's Landing proves that they are ready. All that it proves is that they wanted to meet their father and sisters. They are young and impulsive. Even if they are ready to fight a war, is the rest of Westeros. Can you guarantee that Dorne would have enough support, patience? I am weary of patience. Too long has the blood of my sister and niece and nephew cried out for vengeance. Do you not feel their loss? Every night I hear their screams for justice. Do you not hear their cries? Tears spilled slowly from her eyes. Can the blood of Arthur and Jon in battle bring justice for the murders of Elia, Rhaenys, and Aegon? Would your death in battle bring justice? If Dorne raises its banners alone, we would all die. Martell and Dayne would be extinguished. Would not your precious Ned protect you and your children? He smiled cruelly at her and held her arms still, though she struggled to free herself from his grip. Her eyes narrowed. He would do his best. A man who has not seen his children or you in near a decade. Why you have so much faith in him, I will never understand. He would have married me if the rebellion never happened. So he told you how a man so boring charmed his way to your virtue. Stop it. You met Ned in passing 17 years ago. He was the only man I have ever met who wanted to know me. 100 men looked at me and only wanted my body. He looked at me and wanted my heart. He released a hand from her shoulder and ran it along her cheek, brushing away her tears with the motion. And me, she laughed. You stole my first kiss when I was 14 years old, and you insisted that we still play in the water gardens. He grinned salaciously at her. I would have stolen more if Elia had not found us. She scolded you quite soundly, if I recall. She forbade me from ever trying to dishonor you. You never have, she breathed, holding his piercing gaze. He pulled her close and kissed her hard. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding onto him as his hands ran the length of her back. Eventually they pulled apart, lust filling their eyes. She took his hand and led him from the room to her chambers at the end of the corridor. It was their way of remembering and forgetting, as it had been for 15 years. The first time they had shared a bed, Ashara had been several months pregnant with Arthur. Ashara had never seen her trysts with Oberyn to be out of love. Though they did care for one another, there was a certain sense of comfort Ashara drew from her closeness to the Red Viper of Dorne. If either of them had lived their lives according to how their parents would have wished, there was a fair chance that they would have been wed. However, with her 4 bastards and his 8, neither of them were seen as being marriable. Not that either had any particular interest in marriage in their present situations. Some time later, when they were still abed, their conversation turned back to the children. She lay on her stomach, stretched across the bed. He sat beside her, running a lazy hand along her spine. Alice needs to visit Sunspear soon, though I am considering waiting to have her go until the boys return. Why does she need to go? We are trying to broker a contract with one of the spice merchants. I allow her to handle most of the affairs of Starfall. Until Edric is of age and weds, or until she weds, there is much she can learn by overseeing the family business. Including your trade agreements. She made a sleepy affirmative sound. Only with new contracts. I sit with her when we renegotiate with our current merchants. In a few years Edric will attend those meetings as well. Typically I have one or both of the boys go with her, but as they are away. Would you like me to go with her? She turned so that faced him and smiled. If you wish, my prince. He laughed and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. I could bring Jon and Arthur back from King's Landing instead, and let everyone believe that you are trying to provoke a war. We received a letter a few days past that they are safely in Lord Beric's custody and visiting with Lord Stark. I do not believe that it would be wise for you to retrieve them. Nor would my brother. Were I to travel to the capital, my brother would likely believe that I went to kill the king. Her brow raised and her lips twisted into a smirk. I would think it as well. Does everyone believe that I thirst so deeply for blood? From Dorne to the Wall, all men know that Prince Oberyn Martell of Dorne has an unquenchable thirst for many things. From blood to wine to women you are always ever craving. She wrapped an arm around his neck and kissed him. He pulled her onto his lap and kissed her breathless. I would return your sons without bloodshed. He murmured into her neck once their kisses slowed. I would rather you protect my daughter. Have you seen her with a sword? He scoffed. She could kill any man who dared to lay a hand on her. She is my firstborn and my only daughter. He smoothed her hair and tucked several loose strands behind her ears. Have I ever treated your children as anything less than my own? Never. And I never will. Alysanne rode her horse along the coast shortly after daybreak. There was no feeling that she loved more than the wind whipping against her face as she raced her sandsteed along the beach and headlands. There was no feeling that she hated more than brushing her hair out after her morning rides. She longed for the thin, easy-to-manage hair that was common among the Dornish, but her hair was as northern as her father. She was packed for her journey to Sunspear to negotiate with spice traders from the Summer Isles. She knew that the negotiations would only last a few days, and that they were important for increasing her family's wealth and status. House Dayne was among the wealthiest families in Dorne, and by far the oldest. It was their goal and desire to become a trade center in western Dorne. Yet it was not to Sunspear that she longed to go, but to King's Landing to see her father and half-sisters. She was jealous that her brothers had left her behind when they packed their swords and armor and fled to see their father. She was angry that they had not told her of their plans, furious that they had not taken her with them. She should have known that they would try to meet their father. She should have thought to run to him as well. She saw the ravens flying to the Maester's tower when she was nearly back at the gates of Starfall. The black bird stood out starkly against the white of the spires of her home. She rode swiftly across the causeway which ran between the mainland and the island upon which Starfall was built. She slowed her pace as she passed beneath the entry gates of the castle. Already there were men and women milling about the castle grounds to perform their duties. They greeted her with polite nods of the head before continuing on their ways. She made her way to the stables where she dismounted and led her stallion to his stall. "How was your ride, my lady?" Andry asked, as she was loosening the many belts from her mount. Andry was gray and long-bearded with few teeth and countless wrinkles, but his eyes and mind were still sharp. He was their stable master and had been so for many long years. "Refreshing," she replied with a smile, her violet eyes dancing with merriment. "There is nothing in this world as wonderful as riding at daybreak on a sunny day." He smiled back at her, the many gaps in his teeth proudly displayed. "I can't disagree with you on that. I'll get your travel mounts ready for your departure with Prince Oberyn later today. Just be careful, it's like to be very hot today." "Thank you, I will make certain that we do not exhaust the horses." She walked from the stables to the main castle at a leisurely pace. She went over the things she needed to accomplish before leaving. Other than her goodbyes to her mother, aunts, and brother, she needed to send off a few letters and change into her travel clothes. She was close upon her rooms when her Aunt Illyria found her. Illyria's brown hair hung loose about her shoulders. Her blue-violet eyes were wide with worry. "There you are, you need to speak with your mother right away." "What is wrong?" She shook her head. "A raven came bearing ill news. Come with me." Illyria turned and strode quickly down the hall which led to their family's solar. Alysanne followed quickly behind her. She could feel panic gripping her heart. She had no idea what news they could have received, but her thoughts flew directly to her brothers. When they entered the family solar, her mother was seated at the desk, holding a letter in her hands. She was wiping at tears which were falling from her eyes. Her Aunt Myrissa was sewing quietly beside her. Prince Oberyn paced behind them, eyes blazing. With anger, his hands twitched at his side, reaching for swords that were not strapped to his body. "Take a seat," Ashara said, looking up. Illyria and Alysanne both sat near her. Ashara passed the letter to her daughter and rested her face in her hands. Alysanne read the letter slowly, trying to understand everything Lord Beric had said. There was a conflict in the Riverlands between houses Lannister and Tully, brought about by Lady Catelyn Stark holding Tyrion Lannister custody in the Vale. Sir Jaime Lannister, in retaliation, had attacked Lord Stark's men and Lord Stark himself. Lord Stark was unconscious and his leg was broken. Jon and Arthur were retained in King's Landing, though they had considered chasing after the Kingslayer. "I will go to King's Landing," Oberyn muttered when Alysanne looked up from the letter. "That will be seen as an act of war," Ashara replied sharply. "There is already war, my lady. The boys are my squires and subjects of my brother. They will fight a war for Lord Stark and I will lead them as I always have." Ashara bit her lip and looked down at her hands. She said no more. "I will ride with Prince Oberyn to retrieve my brothers and see that our father is well," Ali said firmly. We are children of House Stark. It is our duty to support our father. The Lannisters attacked us. It is our duty to respond in kind. Alice, her mother began, concern showing in her tones. I am the eldest child of Lord Eddard Stark, Alysanne nearly shouted as she stood. It is my duty to defend the honor of my houses. My brothers are there, my sisters. I will not stand by while our family is attacked. Ashara turned her gaze from her daughter to Prince Oberyn. It seems that you have turned all of my children into warriors. She turned back to her daughter, weary. Be safe, my love. My heart would never mend if I lost you or your brothers. Alice walked to her mother and embraced her tightly. I will keep them safe. Ashara laid a gentle hand on her daughter's face. I need someone to keep you safe. Oberyn laid a hand on Ashara's shoulder and the other on Alysanne's back. I will keep her safe, I promise. He pulled away and strode to the door. Meet me at the stables in an hour, Alice. Ashara, wait 3 days after our departure to send word to my brother and daughters if you send word by Raven. If you have a man that you trust completely, send him to my brother today explaining everything. I will make no move on behalf of Dorne that Doran does not sanction. But I am not a patient man. The prince swept out of the room a moment later, ready for blood and battle. We will come back, mother, safe and whole, I swear it. Ashara squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. I love you too. Alysanne left the room a few moments later. She hurried to her rooms and changed from her morning riding dress into her travel linens and leathers. Her handmaids brushed through her hair and wove it into a tight braid. When she was ready, she made her way down to the courtyard of the castle. Already waiting were Prince Oberyn and 20 guards of houses Martell and Dayne. Her mother, aunts, and little brother were waiting in the courtyard as well. She hugged her mother and aunts goodbye and then knelt before her brother. I will be back soon, she said as she embraced him. He looked to the ground, his dark purple eyes heavy with tears. Mom said that our father is hurt. Will he be okay? I don't know, but I do know that he will do everything in his power to be okay so that he can meet you. She stood, kissing the top of his head on her way up, and walked toward the waiting men. Their horses were brought out, already saddled and loaded with supplies. They mounted their steeds and rode forth through the gates of Starfall. Alysanne and Oberyn led the men down the causeway, and then northward to the Red Mountains of Dorne. From there they would travel north and east to King's Landing and Uncertainty. I promise, Lya, I promise. Lord Eddard muttered the words in his sleep. Vayon Poole was trying to wake him. Ned had been asleep for 6 days and 7 nights. His fever had broken, but his leg would take a very long time to heal. When Ned opened his eyes, Vayon gave him water to drink and informed him that the king wanted to see him immediately. When Vayon left to summon the captain of Ned's guard and the king, Ned noticed that Jon was sleeping in a corner of the room, his hand on a sword. At least Ned had thought he was asleep until the boy opened his eyes wide at the sound of the door closing. Father, he said softly, are you well? Ned observed the boy quietly for a few moments. His mind was still reeling from his dream of Rhaegar's Tower of Joy. So many had died at that tower. Kingsguard had died to defend their infant king, even from his own blood. Lyanna's son, did I fail you, Lya? Is that why I have dreamt this dream again? Jon had her eyes, he had her hair, he had her spirit. He was raised well, Lya. Ashara did not fail you even though I did. Father, his eyes were wide with concern. He walked to the bed and held Ned's hand tight. As well as can be expected, he replied quietly. How are Arthur and your sisters? Sansa is worried. She prays for your health. Arya is quiet until she is training with Syrio. She is angry, we are all angry. Arthur and I wanted to avenge the wrongs of the Kingslayer against our family. Lord Beric and your men forced us to remain here. For that I am thankful. You might have met your death if you had followed after the Kingslayer. And if you die, Lya, even in death I do not believe you would forgive me if your son were to die. Now please leave me before the king arrives. I will speak with you after he leaves. The boy bowed his head respectfully. Yes, father. As Jon was leaving, Alan entered the room. Alan was now the captain of Eddard's guard since Jory Castle had been murdered at Jaime Lannister's orders. He informed Ned that he had increased the guard on the household. Lord Beric and his men were now housed within the Tower of the Hand, adding their strength to Eddard's guard. The bodies of the men who had died at the hands of the Lannister guards had been given to the Silent Sisters. Ned was still speaking with Alan when Vayon returned, informing him that the king and queen were outside the room. Ned's men left shortly before Robert Baratheon and Cersei Lannister entered. Cersei wanted Ned's head for daring to take actions against a member of her family. Ned wanted Jaime Lannister's head for the attack against himself and his men. Robert Baratheon, the great king of Westeros, wanted an end to it. 3 Stark men and 5 Lannister men had died in the fighting. The king found that to be equitable. He struck the queen in anger and told Ned to take up the office of Hand again, yet he refused to speak on any matter of importance. He insisted that he would go hunting the following day. The king and half of the court left for the hunt within 2 days. Thus it was left to Ned, restored to his position as Hand of the King, to hold court in King Robert's name. After a few days of sitting in court, listening to petitioners while his leg throbbed painfully as he sat upon the most uncomfortable chair in existence, men arrived from the Riverlands. They told of a band of men ravaging small towns in the Riverlands. The band was led by a man whose description could only match the mountain. It stood to reason that Lord Tywin Lannister had sent out the men to fight against the Riverlands in response to Lady Catelyn taking Tyrion Lannister hostage. Ned felt his leg throbbing in pain as he listened to the pleas. The Lannisters wanted to bloody the Tullys because the Tullys had taken a Lannister hostage. Would the bloodshed never end? Ned was weary of wars. He had been weary of wars since his youth. He decided to send a party of men to seek out Gregor Clegane and bring him to justice. He trusted Lord Beric and would have sent the Lord of Blackhaven if he did not fear Jon and Arthur riding out with him. Ned could not and would not allow the two boys to ride out to war. They were too young, too precious. Young Loras Tyrell was the first man to volunteer, though he was more of a boy than a man. Ned hesitated to send the boy, but he did not doubt the boy's skill or desire to fight. In the end, Ned relented and agreed to send Loras Tyrell. Ned also sent Thoros of Myr, Sir Gladden Wilda, and Lord Lothar Mallory. All of the men were to gather 20 fighters to leave with Sir Mark Piper and Sir Carol Vance in order to deliver the king's justice. Ned sent 20 of his own men to join with them. He hoped that the decision was wise. He hoped that they would bring justice. He hoped that they could bring peace. He was not certain, but he had learned long ago that there were no certainties in life. He found himself wanting to send his children from the city. He wanted to send them away from the threat of violence and war. The girls would be safe at home in Winterfell. Jon and Arthur would be safe back in Dorne. Yet it tore at his heart to think of separating the children again. Although their initial meeting had been uncomfortable, the girls and their half-brothers were getting along well. He often saw them speaking and laughing with one another. The boys seemed to be helping to heal the horrific rift which had formed between Sansa and Arya after Lady's death. He found a growing wish in his heart that all of the children could be together. He was certain that all of his boys would get along well. Certainly Jon and Arthur would be better influences upon Robb than Theon Greyjoy. He knew that his dream was impossible. He knew that Catelyn would never allow Ashara's children in Winterfell or allow her own to travel to Starfall. He did not even know that Ashara would allow Catelyn's children to visit Starfall. His other issue of sending the children home was finding a safe route for them to travel. The King's Road would not be safe now that the banners of Tully and Lannister were called to arms. He would need to send the girls to Winterfell by boat, though finding a trustworthy captain would take time, so he would bide his time. At worst, he could send his daughters to Dorne. He had entrusted Lady Ashara with Jon's safety. He believed that she could keep his daughters safe as well. They rode on Dornish sand steeds, the fastest horses in the world. They did not tire as common horses were wont to do, maintaining a quick and steady gait for nearly 2 days. Even when their riders were resting. The ride still took 15 days from Starfall to King's Landing at the rate they traveled. With lesser horses, the journey would have been considerably longer. They changed horses at Blackmont, Nightsong, and Blackhaven, entrusting their own horses to their fellow Dornish. They passed through the Red Mountains and into the Dornish Marches, the green sloping hills on the outermost border of Dorne. The land grew greener and melted into the gently rolling hills which were shared by the Reach and Stormlands. They rode hard and swift, anxious to know what more had transpired in King's Landing. Prince Oberyn led the party with determination. He decided when they rested and what trails they would follow. They did not take the Rose Road. Oberyn preferred the riding paths which led from the Boneway to King's Landing. The paths were well used, worn by travelers heading north throughout the centuries. Alysanne rode close beside Oberyn, outpacing Demon Sand, one of the prince's squires. She would have ridden faster than Oberyn if she had the slightest idea of how to reach King's Landing. Not knowing the way, she instead rode beside the prince. As anxious as she was to see her family in the capital, she did find herself enjoying the landscape of the lands beyond Dorne. The farthest north she had ever been before their journey to King's Landing was Highgarden, and that had been when she was still a young girl. She had vague memories of flowers and high white walls. More recently she had traveled to Blackhaven in the Dornish Marches for her Aunt Illyria's betrothal to Lord Dondarrion. The rest of her time, she and her siblings had remained within the main regions of Dorne. They had traveled the deserts and the coast. They had spent several years living in Sunspear and the Water Gardens, yet more often than not Alysanne and her brothers had lived at Starfall. The lands of the Reach and Stormlands were far different than the dry landscape of Dorne. The hills were green, rich with grass and trees. Herds of deer roamed the hill country and foxes howled in the night. Birds of 100 colors flew from tree to tree, calling to one another by day and night. Were she less concerned about her brothers, cousin, and father, Alysanne could have spent weeks traveling with ease throughout the beautiful green lands beyond Dorne. Yet she could not rest her heart. She would pace anxiously whenever they rested for the night. She feared for the safety of her brothers. She feared for the health of her father. Though she could barely remember him, she knew her father from the letters which he had written to her throughout the years. Her heart feared that she would never see him again. Daemon was fond of teasing her about her desire to see her father. "Does this stranger truly matter to you?" he would ask. He would never understand, could never understand. Her father was her father. It did not matter that he lived so far away or that he had not seen herself and her brothers in so many long years. He wrote to her once per week. He sent gifts for their named days and on the festival days for the 7. He even sent gifts for Nymeria's Day, the annual celebration in Dorne held in remembrance of Queen Nymeria's conquest of Dorne. Lord Stark may have been an absent father, but he was a loving father. There was no doubt in Alysanne's mind that her father loved her. Prince Oberyn was rather quiet on their journey. His onyx eyes were hard, observing everything and giving nothing away. He would sometimes watch her when they rested. He had always watched her brothers, and his daughters with much the same expression when they had learned to fight and ride. He always waited for them to either reach a conclusion or to ask for help. She had yet to learn how to read his closed expressions but drew comfort from his protection. Daemon would watch her when they rested as well, but his interest was of a far different nature than Oberyn's. Daemon enjoyed flirting with her or any pretty face he saw. She enjoyed his attentions. It served to distract her from her worries. She was never quite certain of his intentions. Maybe his intention was just to distract her. Maybe he viewed her as a conquest. Though she enjoyed his affection and found him attractive, he would never get more from her than smiles and mostly innocent touches. Alysanne wanted to fall in love. She did not want to give her virtue to any man who happened to smile at her and promise a good time. She wanted to wed a good man who would love her and their children. Her mother had wanted the same thing when she was young, but her life had taken a much different path. A marriage between Daemon and Alysanne was not out of the question, as they were both bastards of noble Dornish houses. Alys, however, did not love him. Daemon's only love seemed to be Princess Arianne Martell. He had once been so bold as to ask for the princess's hand in marriage, only to be rejected quite firmly. Their days progressed in a relatively similar fashion. They would ride, sometimes for an entire day, and then rest. When they rested, they would speak. In the morning, they would ride again. Eventually, the riding trails from Dorne merged onto the Rose Road. They slowed their pace as the shadow of King's Landing grew in the distance. The structure seemed at first to be a jagged hill, but as they drew closer, individual spires and towers could be seen. The walls of the city grew larger and individual colors could be seen in the structure. Parts of the wall were red, some were gray, and some were white. They passed into the city through the King's Gate. If Prince Oberyn had given them time to pause, Alys would have lost herself in everything there was to see within the vast city. The prince led them through the twisting, winding streets of the city. He sat stiffly upon his mount instead of his usually relaxed position. He hated the city, and how could he not when it held such dark memories? They eventually made their way onto broader, tree-lined avenues. At one point, the great sept of Baelor shadowed their paths. The golden domes of the white building shone brightly in the morning sun. They gradually made their way to the enormous fortress at the far end of the street. The walls and spires of the Red Keep shone red as blood in the sun. Imposing was a mild term for how terrifying the structure appeared. Spikes lined the walls, some even held skulls as a reminder of the power of the people living inside the fortress. It was past midday when they passed the gates of the Red Keep. Oberyn told the guards that they were seeking an audience with the Hand of the King. The guards informed them that the Hand was holding court, and they were welcome to attempt to make a request if the Hand was willing to speak with them. Oberyn smiled and assured them that the Hand would willingly speak with them. Alysanne took note that he did not tell the guards his name. He had simply told the guards that they were from Dorne, seeking audience with the Hand. They dismounted from their horses at the common stables. 10 of their men remained behind to watch over their belongings and tend to their mounts. The remaining men followed Prince Oberyn and Alysanne into the castle. They made their way to the Great Hall at a swift but easy pace. Occasionally, Alys would stare at the lavish surroundings. She had never seen a building like the Red Keep before in her life. The prince, on the other hand, had spent many days within the castle. His sister had lived and died within the halls of the Red Keep. No doubt he could see her ghost as they walked to the throne room. The doors into the Great Hall were open when they arrived. The court was filled with petitioners and courtiers. People who were highborn stood closer to the throne than those who were low-born. Commoners, knights, lords, ladies, anyone who wanted to see or be seen. Some knelt and some stood, but only those on the throne or upon its dais were seated. Oberyn walked them slowly toward the front of the crowd. He moved as silently and gracefully as a cat, though his posture was still tense. Eventually they were close enough that the figure seated upon the iron monstrosity would be able to see them clearly. He was small on the throne, though the size of the throne would make anyone seem small. He seemed regal upon the throne, even though his casted leg spoke to his injuries. His face was plain and somber, and his eyes held those of his petitioners. When he was finished speaking with the current petitioner, a farmer whose house had burned down, he looked out to the crowd. Lord Eddard Stark's eyes found Prince Oberyn's. Both of the men stiffened, and allies wondered why they looked upon one another with such coldness. Prince Oberyn Martell, Lord Stark said, "What has brought you to King's Landing?" There were whispers and murmurs throughout the room. Their presence had been noticed, but until that point they had been anonymous. Oberyn stepped forward, followed by allies and Daemon. "I heard that you have had some troubles here, Lord Stark. From the look of your leg I can see that I was not misinformed." He smirked slightly. "I have also come to find my squires. I do believe that you know them." Lord Stark tensed. "Indeed I do, they are well." "I am glad to hear that. May I present my companions, Daemon Sand of Godsgrace and Alysanne of Starfall." Allies appreciated the prince not referring to her as a Sand when introducing her at court. It prevented gossip. Ned's attention immediately snapped from the Viper of Dorne to Alysanne. His eyes softened to see her. If she had been less proper she would have run to him. She knew that she could not go to him. She knew that she had to maintain decorum. She curtsied to him. He smiled at her, though it was brief and slight. He turned to Oberyn again, his expression harder than before. "Alan, the head of my household guard, will escort you to the Tower of the Hand. I will speak with you at length after I have concluded today's petitions." From his right, a man dressed in Stark colors stepped forward. Lord Stark whispered a few words to him before he stepped off of the dais. He approached Oberyn. "Prince Oberyn, I am Alan, if you will come with me." The prince gave a crisp nod of his head and they followed after the man. He led them from the room through one of the access doors at the side of the room. "Rooms will be given to you within the tower. Lord Stark has also asked that your horses and belongings should be brought to the Hand's Tower." They agreed and followed after Alan. When they arrived at the tower, some of their men went with a few of the Stark men to retrieve their horses. Alan informed them that Lord Stark suggested that Prince Oberyn be escorted to Lord Barrick. Oberyn agreed and walked with one of the Stark men to see Lord Dondarrion. Daemon followed after the prince. Lord Stark also suggested that you may want to see your brothers and sisters, Lady Alysanne. She blushed. Apparently her father had informed his man of who she was. "Thank you. Where are Jon and Arthur?" "I have an idea of where they might be, though I will ask, if you will follow me." She agreed and followed behind him. They walked through the halls of the Tower of the Hand and up a flight of stairs. Alan asked several men along the way if they knew where Jon or Arthur were. When they received a firm answer, they walked up another flight of stairs. Alan opened a large oak door and she stepped into a large, mostly unfurnished room. After she entered, he closed the door behind her. Inside the room, Edric Dayne and a young girl were standing at attention before a slight, bald man. All three held wooden swords. Standing by the wall behind them were Jon and Arthur, watching in silence. The boys turned at the sound of the door opening and smiled when they saw her. "Allies," Arthur exclaimed, surprised and delighted to see his older sister. The other three turned to look at her as well. Edric seemed just as surprised as Jon and Arthur. The bald man betrayed no emotion. The girl stared at her curiously, her eyes narrowing upon Allies. The girl so strongly resembled Jon, Arthur, and Lord Stark that she was unquestionably a Stark. "Who are you?" the girl questioned. "I am Alysanne, Jon and Arthur's sister." "I am sorry for interrupting your lessons, Lady Arya." Arya wrinkled her nose at the word lady. "It's nice to meet you. You have a sword." Arya was looking directly at the sword that was fastened at Alysanne's hip. She laughed. She had completely forgotten that she was wearing a blade. "Yes, I have trained with a sword for many years. It seems that you are in the process of learning." Arya favored her with a broad smile. "I am. Edric is training with me. Do you want to watch?" "I will gladly watch, sister." The girl grinned again before returning her attention to her trainer. Allies walked to her brothers and hugged each of them close. "I did not expect you to come," Jon whispered to her. "I did not come alone," she replied, also in hushed tones so that the two receiving lessons would not be disturbed. "Prince Oberyn is here as well. He is with Lord Barrick." The boys stared at her wide-eyed. "Why did he come?" Arthur questioned. "I am not privy to the mind of the prince," she replied. "I came for the two of you and to see our father. We did not lead an army. Prince Doran did not even know of our departure, although I am certain that he knows by now. Other than that, the prince was my escort." "He would not have come just to be your escort," Jon muttered. "I know that. I do not know his mind any more than either of you do." I am also angry that neither of you told me that you were going to come here. The boys had the decency to look ashamed. It was an impulse, Jon soothed, apologetic. She rolled her eyes. If it was just an impulse, then you would not have had time to pack your armor. She glared at them for a few moments and they could come up with no reply other than sheepish apologies. She turned away from them to face her sister and cousin as they trained. What are they like? She asked eventually. Our sisters and father, she clarified when her brothers did not respond at first. Arya is very determined to not be a lady, Arthur informed her. She is stubborn, fierce, playful. She would enjoy Dorne. Sansa is a typical high-born Midlands girl. She is pretty, polite, and has a head filled with empty things. That is hardly fair, Jon scolded. Sansa is kind, a dreamer. She loves music and art. She enjoys all the beautiful things in life. With those interests she sounds positively Dornish, Alys grinned. Where is she? She has actual dancing lessons at this time, Jon replied. Instead of Braavosi water dancing lessons, she has no interest in swords. Few women do outside of Dorne. What is father like? Good, kind, quiet, and busy were the responses that Jon and Arthur gave. They told her about the tournament and about their father's injury. When Arya and Edric's lesson ended, they went to one of the drawing rooms to eat. It was there that Sansa joined them. She was accompanied by her friend Jane Poole. Sansa, this is our sister, Arya stated when the red-haired girl entered the room. Our sister. Alys gave a polite curtsy. I am your half-sister Alysanne. I arrived here a few short hours ago. It is a pleasure to meet you, Lady Sansa. The girl seemed stunned for a short while. It is a pleasure to meet you as well. How was your journey? It was a very long journey, though the horses rode well. King's Landing is quite different than Dorne. Sansa smiled. King's Landing is quite different from Winterfell as well. Would you be kind enough to tell me about Winterfell while we eat? The girl assented happily. Sansa, Arya, and Jane spoke of Winterfell, and the Stark boys who had remained in the north. Alysanne, Jon, Arthur, and Edric spoke of Starfall and Dorne. When they were finished eating, the three northern girls went to have lessons with their septa. Jon, Arthur, and Edric went to find Lord Beric. Alysanne was shown to a small suite of rooms which had been prepared for her so that she could refresh herself and finally change out of her travel clothes. Alys met up with Jon and Arthur later in the day to take a walk around the tower. Much later in the evening they all met again for the evening meal. Jane Poole did not eat with them, just Edric Dayne and the children of Lord Stark. They were joined by Lord Beric, Prince Oberyn, and Lord Stark. The three lords had spent the previous 2 hours in a long discussion within Lord Stark's solar. They all seemed weary and somewhat annoyed, even through his pained exhaustion. Ned smiled when he saw his children. It is good to see you again, Alys, he told her as Alan helped him to the table. You resemble your mother very much. Thank you, father, she replied happily. She walked to him and embraced him quickly before taking her place at the table. Propriety mattered less when there was only family and friends in the room. His hug was warm and strong, reassuring. They spoke little of serious matters. Alysanne spoke of the ride to King's Landing. Arya and Sansa spoke of their lessons. Jon, Arthur, and Edric also spoke of the lessons they had been given that day. When their meal was nearly ended, Lord Stark changed the tone of the conversation. I have spoken at length with Prince Oberyn, he said. We are in agreement that you should visit Dorne. What? Why? Sansa and Arya asked both questions. The Dornish children simply looked on in surprise. King's Landing is not a safe place for young children, Prince Oberyn replied in somber tones. 3 of my men were murdered here, Ned added. My leg was broken by the Jaime Lannister, and in response all that the king has done is go hunting. But I don't want to leave King's Landing, Sansa protested. I am betrothed to Prince Joffrey. I am to be his queen. Arya's face twisted in disgust. Their father inhaled deeply. Prince Oberyn tensed, a grim expression upon his face. It was his nephew who should have been king after Rhaegar's death. It was here within the Red Keep that Prince Oberyn's sister, nephew, and niece had been murdered. Many young girls dream of being the queen, Lady Sansa, Oberyn muttered darkly. My sister was to have been queen, my nephew was to have been a king. As the Viper of Dorne spoke, all of the diners tensed in their seats. Instead, my family's blood was spilled here by the queen's father. Her husband was killed by the king in a war caused by... He stopped, looking at Ned with thinly veiled anger. Then he smiled, swiftly changing the tone of his voice. By a mad king. The silence which filled the room was deafening, the tension thick. Oberyn took a few gulps of wine and laughed to break the spell. Now I hear that King Robert, once so strong and robust, is little more than a drunk. Is that the sort of man whose son anyone would want to marry? Oh, but Joffrey is nothing like the king, Sansa insisted. He is beautiful and golden. Our children would have beautiful golden hair. They would be as brave as wolves and as proud as lions. They wouldn't be lions, they would be stags, Arya spat. Joffrey is a craven and a liar, and his children would be stags just like the king. He is not, Sansa cried out fiercely. Ned swore softly, causing the ever-watchful gaze of Oberyn to fall upon him. Whatever spell Lord Stark found himself under, he pushed away. "Girls, that is enough. I believe that it is time for you to retire for the evening." He spoke as firmly as he had when seated upon the Iron Throne. "I want all of you to rest for the evening," he told the children. He smiled gently at Allies. "I will spend more time with you tomorrow. It is good to see you again." Each of the children stood obediently and bade the lords to have a good night. The desert wolves lingered at the door a moment longer than their sisters, but they also obediently went to their rooms. Something was wrong. Each of the children could sense that there was something their father had not told them. There was something that Oberyn Martell either knew or suspected. Whatever the issue, the children would learn nothing that night. What direction should a wolf take when they are trapped between lions and snakes? Perhaps that was a morality tale old Nan should have taught Eddard Stark as a child. Old Nan's warnings had been related to behaving or ancient legends. She had never told Ned or his siblings what to do when your heart is pulled in multiple directions. She had never taught them how to play politics. Now Ned sat as Hand of the King, the second most powerful person in Westeros. He wanted nothing to do with power and politics. He was raised to be Brandon's bannerman. He was made for a simpler life. He was made for running a keep for his lord and for loving a wife and children. Yet life had changed when Rhaegar had disappeared with Lyanna. It should have been a relatively simple matter to be Hand of the King. Then Bran broke his back. Lysa's letter arrived for Catelyn, implicating the Lannisters in Jon Arryn's death. The direwolves of his daughters were killed and lost, and when he finally arrived in King's Landing he learned that someone had tried to murder his son. On top of his own family issues, the small council was made of a collection of scheming rats. The king did not care about being a ruler, and the crown was deeply in debt. He had hoped that his problems would not get worse, but apparently the gods believed that he did not have enough worries. His broken leg and the threat of war between the Riverlands and Westerlands due to his wife capturing Tyrion Lannister attested to the arrival of new dangers. Then, to top everything off, Prince Oberyn Martell was seated beside him in the Tower of the Hand when he realized what the seed is strong meant. Ned was able to put off explaining his disturbing thoughts until the next morning. Oh. The Viper of Dorne had wanted to know what bothered Ned so much that he sent all of the children from the room with scarcely a second thought. Ned told the man that he needed to rest and had much upon his mind. He promised that they would speak in the morning. He had spent the night poor through the vast tome which Jon Arryn had been reading before he died. Every Baratheon was born black of hair, even in marriages between one who was light of hair and one who was dark of hair. If that were true, then why were all three of King Robert's trueborn children blonde-haired and green-eyed while his bastards were all black-haired and blue-eyed? The horrible pattern was laid out before his eyes through the words of his children and in the presence of his bastards. "He's not a stag," Sansa had boldly stated. Bastards in the Tower of the Hand and hidden bastards who would someday sit upon the Iron Throne. So suddenly clear it had become to him. The Queen's children were not the king's, just as at least one of Ned's bastards was not his own. "Promise me, Ned," Lyanna's ghost whispered in his ear. In his fitful sleep he dreamt of the day he had ridden into King's Landing during the rebellion. He saw them lying there dead, the children of Prince Rhaegar. They had been mutilated, destroyed. Robert Baratheon had looked upon them and approved. Dragon spawn, he had called the children. The half-brother and half-sister of the boy named Jon Sand. Rhaenys and Aegon, the niece and nephew of the Red Viper, whose presence in King's Landing was just as dangerous as the truth of Cersei Lannister's children. Ned would need to tell the king what he knew, but he could not allow the children to be present. He may not have liked the boy named Joffrey Baratheon, but the three children did not deserve to be murdered because they were bastards. He could not trust anyone. He was uncertain that he could even trust Prince Oberyn, with whom was shared the secret of Jon's birth, perhaps especially not Oberyn. Between his unsettling dreams and the pain of his leg, he had not slept well that night. The sky was only just beginning to lighten when Ned gave up his attempts at sleep. He called to Thrin, his page, who stood outside his door. He requested that when Alysanne awoke that she should break her fast with him in his private study. Ned spent the hours between the time he awoke and his daughter's arrival performing a variety of tasks. With help from one of his stewards, he was cleaned and dressed. Though his leg was painful, he refused any milk of the poppy. He would need a clear head that day. When he was ready, Alan assisted him with walking to his study. Prince Oberyn was already inside, much to Ned's displeasure. "You are awake early," Ned said. His voice was hardly welcoming. The man's lips twisted into a grim smile. He lowered his feet from where they rested upon Ned's desk, and he sheathed the dagger which he had been stroking casually. "I find it difficult to sleep in this place. I hear their blood cry out to me and wonder when." He let his words drop off, but Ned knew what the prince meant. When would Aaliyah and her children be avenged? If Oberyn knew the truth of Cersei's children, he would kill Cersei and Robert, of that Ned had little doubt. Would he kill the children who had usurped his niece and nephew? Would he do to them what had been done to his own blood? "You may go, Alan," Ned told the head of his guard. The man left with a respectful bow, closing the door as he left. Ned seated himself in one of the large, cushioned chairs in the room. "Why did you seek out my solar?" His lips curled into a viper's smile. "I am still curious as to what made you so disturbed last night when we dined. What better time to discuss such matters than first thing in the morning?" Ned released a weary sigh. This was definitely not the discussion that he wanted to have first thing in the morning. "I am expecting to break my fast with Alysanne. She can wait. Other than a few short hours last night, I have not seen my daughter in 9 years. For that there is only one person to blame." Ned clenched his hands around the arms of his chair and gritted his teeth. He refused to be baited by the man. "I am the Lord of Winterfell. I cannot leave my responsibilities whenever my heart so desires." Oberyn laughed. "But you could leave your marriage vows as your heart desired?" There were few good retorts to the biting accusations of the prince. "I have dealt with my discretions as I have best been able. I am grateful that you have been an influence upon my children." His smile widened. "Oh, it has been a pleasure, especially the youngest, Lucas, the other child who called Ned father and might not be his son." Shortly after Lucas Sand had been born, Ashara had sent a letter to Ned saying that her newest child may or may not be his. She was uncertain. The boy looked much like Alysanne, and all of Prince Oberyn's children had his eyes. Lucas had Ashara's eyes. Ali's had Ashara's eyes. The boy was most likely Ned's, and he had claimed the boy, but there was still a chance that Lucas was the son of Prince Oberyn Martell, a fact of which both men were well aware. Ned raised a brow in silence but refused to answer Oberyn. "If you wish for me to leave, answer my question. What is it that bothers you? It was not your leg which made you send the children to bed yesterday evening. It was not your leg which kept you awake this past night. It was something about the young prince which caused you to be troubled." Ned breathed deep, attempting to quell the thoughts which troubled him. "I have a suspicion about a matter, though I do not know anything for a certainty." Oberyn shifted in his seat. He leaned forward, hands upon his knees, gazing intently at the Lord of Winterfell. "A suspicion?" Ned ran a weary hand across his face. Should he tell the man what he suspected? Was it wise? Would you ever hold a child responsible for the crimes of their parents? The man sat back, genuine shock displayed upon his face. "A strange question, but no, I would not." Ned gave a slow nod of his head, pondering his next step. All things considered, if he were to trust his fears about the Lannisters to anyone, Prince Oberyn Martell was his best option, though Ned also considered that Oberyn might be the worst person to whom he might tell the truth. "Do you know why I came here?" Oberyn's gaze was incredulous. "Is this a trick question?" Seeing that Ned was serious, he continued. "You had an ulterior motive other than serving your dear friend the king. My son Brandon fell from a tower in Winterfell before we left. He was unconscious when I departed and has since awoken. He recalls nothing of his fall and will never walk again." Oberyn offered his condolences, which Ned graciously accepted before continuing. "Before my son awoke, a man with a Valyrian steel dagger attempted to murder him. The man also attacked my wife. My son's direwolf saved their lives." He paused, allowing the information to settle. "Here is our belief that the Lannisters are behind the attack on Bran and the death of Jon Arryn." Oberyn regarded him with a curiously neutral expression. "And now you have a suspicion as to why?" "Yes." Oberyn stood suddenly and walked to the window. "Do you know that there are said to be hidden passages throughout the Red Keep? My sister Aaliyah once told me that she could hear whispers in the walls of her rooms here. I will leave you to your morning meal. I would be interested in continuing this conversation later." The prince held Ned's gaze for a moment, his eyes full of meaning. They would talk later, somewhere that would be more private, somewhere that they could speak of dangers without being overheard. With a polite word of parting, Oberyn swept from the room. Ned waited in the room for his daughter and the morning meal to arrive. The food arrived first, platters piled with meats, breads, and fruit. He poured himself some of the beer which had been brought for the meal and chewed on some of the bread. Some minutes later, Alice arrived in the room. "Good morning, father," she greeted merrily. He smiled at her. Thankfully, there was no need to force a smile when he saw one of his children. Their presence was always a joy. "Good morning, did you have a pleasant day here yesterday?" she replied as she gathered food from the platters onto a smaller plate. "Yes, my sisters are wonderful and the capital is unlike anything I have ever seen before." She seated herself across from him, a nervous smile upon her lips. She looked so much like her mother, just as Sansa resembled her own mother. Her face also bore a resemblance to Lyanna, longer and northern. "I am glad to hear that. I am sorry that I have not seen you for these many years. Your name day just passed. It is difficult for me to believe that you are already 6 and 10. And he had missed all of those years. Mother has said much the same every year. Every time I go to Sunspear, she tells me how much of a young woman I seem upon my return. You look very much like her, she laughed. So everyone tells me. Oberyn's daughters say that I am like to break as many hearts. He smiled. Your mother did have that reputation. She broke men's hearts with a smile and a dance. Her smile faded and she pursed her lips. Is it my fault that mother never married? He was shocked at the notion. Of course not, you should never blame yourself for the choices which I made regarding your mother. She and I were young and made decisions which have been unfair to her reputation. Mother doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks about her. I think that my aunts and the staff gave up on the nobility of House Dayne's reputation when it comes to my mother long ago. The princes do not seem to mind. He nearly scoffed at that. Prince Oberyn was quite skilled at contributing to Ashara's lack of reputation. He decided against mentioning such things in front of his daughter. Have you and your brothers spent much time with Prince Doran? She nodded slowly as she chewed on the food which was in her mouth. We only returned home to Starfall about 6 turns ago after spending 2 years at the Water Gardens. Prince Doran taught us Syves. He told me that I was the most adept at learning the game. Jon is good at the game but prefers swordplay over strategy. Arthur would rather be on a horse or practicing his martial training than sitting in a room learning strategy. Ned laughed. The more he learned of Arthur, the more his son reminded him of Brandon, always wild, willful, and eager for a fight. Your brothers have told me that you are quite skilled with a sword and as a rider. I am the best rider in Dorne, she proclaimed quickly before amending, or at least I am the best that I have seen. Oberyn often tells us and his daughters that we must never be overconfident of our skills, for there may always be someone better. That is wise advice. Do you heed his words? With weapons, yes, but not always when it comes to riding. Her eyes seemed alive with light at the thought of riding. There is nothing more thrilling than racing along the coast with nothing but the sound of wind and waves. I love it truly. Perhaps it was not Arya who was Lyanna come again, perhaps it was Alysanne, Ned mused. Just be careful, sweetling, I would not want any harm to befall you. Of course, father. Now tell me, how have your other studies progressed? Our Meister has taught me all that he can of numbers. Mother allows me to work with our business contracts and to assist with the administration of Starfall. Jon and Arthur travel to meet with our contracts some of the time, but Jon enjoys the business more than Arthur. Mother worried Prince Oberyn by implying that I handle all of our new contracts. Truthfully, one of our stewards handles most of the affairs of Starfall with Mother. But I assist now that I am an adult. Do you enjoy the work? I like working with the spice and cloth merchants. We have a trader who comes twice a year from the Summer Isles selling spices that do not grow in Westeros. We sell them to Highgarden for 3 times the price at which we purchase them. We sell lemon and olive oils to several merchants from Lies, and in return they sell us some of the most beautiful cloth which I have ever seen. We sell the cloth in Old Town and Sunspear. A merchant from her once gave me a looking glass for no charge when Mother signed a contract with him. I think that he wished to marry her for her beauty, but she refused him. And yet he still gave your family his business. Of course, for he said he could still gaze upon the most beautiful women in all the world whenever he returned to us. Mother thinks that I will be able to become a wealthy trader on my own merits. A noble ambition. Would that make you happy? She laughed. I am not unhappy with my life. I do believe that I should be content wherever I am, so long as I am loved by those whom I love. He realized that her smile did not seem to be quite genuine when she said that she was happy. He could not help but feel that it was his fault. I am glad that you are happy. I wish that I had seen more of your life as you have grown into such a remarkable young woman. Her smile fell, though only for the briefest of moments, replaced by another that felt false. It is not your fault, father. I know that you would have spent more time with us if you were able. Sansa and Arya's adoration of you seems to speak truth to what I have always believed. You have never failed to write to me or to send me gifts. I have not doubted your love. His heart ached to look at her, this child of his whose life he had never had any influence upon. He should have visited Ashara's children more. He should have brought them north. I am sorry that you have not been part of my life. I do love you and your brothers. I always have and I always will. No matter where we are, no matter if we are half a world away, we are family. She nodded slowly as tears filled her eyes. He opened his arms to her and she stood, walked to him and fell into his arms. It was a few hours before the midday meal when Ned and Oberyn spoke again. They were seated upon an outdoor terrace overlooking a secluded training yard. Alysanne, Jon, and Arthur were sparring together. Arya and Edric were sparring as well. Many members of their households, including Lord Beric, were in the training yard as well. Sansa was elsewhere with Jane, for the girls were not interested in learning the ways of the sword. There were no hedges or walls near where the men sat, and they sent all of their servants far enough away that the men would not be overheard. They were seated beside a stone retaining wall which divided the terrace from the yard. "She is quite talented," Ned said as he observed his children. "Of course she is, I trained her," Oberyn replied with no small measure of hubris in his voice. "Your youngest seems quite spirited as well." "Wolf blood," he muttered. "She is too much like her aunt." Ned did not bother to look at Oberyn to know how distasteful the expression upon the man's face had become. Their lives were very intertwined, the Lord of Winterfell and the Red Viper of Dorne. Their sisters had married the same man and had died for that man's foolishness. The men had both loved the same woman, Ashara Dayne, whose children Oberyn had helped to raise. They shared the secret of Jon Snow's birth. They would soon share the secret of Ned's suspicions. "Will you tell me now what troubles you?" Alysanne deflected Arthur's sword and spun to lunge at Jon. "Bastards trouble me. Not your bastards nor mine, I assume." Jon jumped away from Alysanne's attack, narrowly missing her blade. He parried her attack and then thrust forward, the momentum turning her toward Arthur. "No, though my heart is troubled that I have not spent near enough time with mine. I have spent time recently visiting the bastards of King Robert." "How many does he have?" "At least 3 whom I have seen. All of them resemble the king, black hair and blue eyes." Alys and Jon teamed up for a brief moment and brought Arthur to the ground, blades at his neck. He raised his hands in defeat and barely removed himself from the game when Alys and Jon resumed their attack upon one another. "And the king's children with the queen. All look remarkably like the queen and not at all like the king." Near the desert trio, Arya was barely holding her ground against the Lord of Starfall. He was older than her and better trained, but she was determined. She ran if his blade seemed to be too close to her. "I have seen other children who look not at all like their father." Ned's eyes fell upon Jon. The boy scarcely resembled Rhaegar Targaryen. His hair, face, and eyes were all Stark. It was his lean build and graceful movement which resembled the former Prince of Dragonstone. There is an old tome, which Jon Arryn had been reading when he died. It records the lineages of all the great houses of Westeros, including descriptions of every member of the family. Every child of House Baratheon has been born black of hair, no matter the color of the mother's hair. The bastards I have seen of the king have also been black of hair, no matter the color of the mother's hair. Edric knocked the sword from Arya's hand, and she knelt in defeat before him. "A curious thing," Oberyn responded with caution. "But what do you suspect?" Ned hesitated a moment and then told Oberyn everything that he knew. He told him of Lysa's letter to Catelyn. He told Oberyn about the attempt to murder Bran and of Sir Jaime Lannister's attack upon himself. Jon held his blade close to Alys's throat, but she merely laughed at him for she was still armed. "I think that Cersei's children are bastards born of incest with her own brother," Ned concluded. Alys grabbed Jon's hand and swung a leg behind his, tripping him and causing him to fall beneath her. She pinned him and brought her own sword to rest against his neck in victory. "And what will you do?" "I will tell the king when he returns. I think that he will believe my conclusion." "If this is your decision, why does it trouble you?" His hands were bloodless from his grip upon the arms of his chair. The children switched partners. Jon practiced with Lord Beric, Arthur with Demon Sand, Alys with Arya, and Edric with one of the younger squires. "I dreamt of the day that King's Landing fell. I saw their bodies. I saw your sister and niece and nephew." Robert looked upon them and was pleased. His voice shook with rage, even now, so many years later. He was still furious over the murders of the children and Princess of Dorne. He would murder the queen's children. "You wish to tell her." The men looked at one another and Ned gave him a brisk nod of his head. "It will not end well. Do you think that I am correct?" "In your hypothesis, I believe that it is quite possibly true. Yet if you are and you confront the queen, what then? Are you prepared to fight the lions? We are already at war. Lord Tywin has sent men to burn villages in the Riverlands in retaliation for my wife taking Tyrion hostage. I sent men from here to subdue Tywin's bandits, and Lord Tully is beginning to amass his own men in defense against the Lannisters." Oberyn's eyes were alight with a hunger that could only be quenched by bloodshed. "Are you willing to do what must be done?" His eyes fell at once upon Jon. "We do not have the support for such an action, which you well know," Ned hissed. "Patience, patience," he spat the word as though it were a curse. "That is all my brother ever speaks of. And think of how different our world would be if my brother had known the meaning of the word, or my sister, or Rhaegar." They gazed upon one another with steady glares for a long moment. "We may never be able to fully avenge all that was lost. I have ordered the death of Gregor Clegane. He is the man responsible for sacking towns in the Riverlands, and he is responsible for murdering your sister. It is Lord Tywin who should be held responsible. And he will be if we are smart about how things are handled now, especially regarding the queen and her children." Oberyn glared stiffly at Ned for a long moment before speaking again. "What is it that you think we should do? You said yesterday that my children would all be welcome to visit Dorne. I would send all of them from this place today. I will make plans to speak with Queen Cersei, and when I do I want you to send all of them south. If anyone has questions, I will say that the girls are going to be visiting their half-siblings in Dorne and that it was not appropriate for my bastards to be occupying the Tower of the Hand. I will send them with Lord Beric and his men. Will any of your men accompany them? Only Syrio Forel if he will go. Jane Poole, my steward's daughter, should leave as well. I will entrust their safety to you and your men. I will remain here. You will need myself and my men should any negative outcome befall you. Lord Beric and his men will be all the escort the children will need on their journey. Ned agreed with some reluctance. After the midday meal, I must speak with Maester Pycelle and Littlefinger shortly. Ned called for Alan and Thrin, and the men approached from the far end of the terrace where they had been keeping watch. Ned took his leave of the prince and gazed sadly upon his children for a moment before he went back to the Tower of the Hand with his 2 men. Inside the tower, Maester Pycelle was already awaiting Ned. He inspected Ned's injured leg, commenting upon the healing process. He also mentioned that Lord Tywin Lannister had written his displeasure that Lord Eddard Stark had sent men after Gregor Clegane. Ned told the aged man that he cared not about Lord Tywin's wrath. The men were carrying out the king's justice. If Tywin Lannister interfered, it would be the king to whom he would answer. Lord Baelish arrived about an hour after the Maester departed. Littlefinger shared whispers he had heard. Men at arms were gathering at Casterly Rock. Prince Joffrey, the Royces, and several other members of the hunting party had returned. Littlefinger remarked upon the presence of Prince Oberyn and Ned's bastards, but Ned waved away the issue. He did not trust the man enough to speak to him upon such matters. It was not long after Baelish left that the midday meal was prepared in the small hall of the Tower of the Hand. Ned was seated between Prince Oberyn and Lord Beric. Ned's children were all seated across from him. It killed him inside that he would send them away, but it was necessary. His children would not be safe in the capital, not after today. He would see them again when everything calmed. Ned ate sparingly, for he could not calm his fears enough to enjoy the meal. If everything went poorly, he would never see his children again. If everything went well, did he even know what the best option would be? The Martells sought revenge. They would use Jon as a tool to seek their revenge. If Robert remained without a lawful heir, his heir was his brother Stannis, a man for whom most people had little love. What would be the best option? Promise me, Ned, Lyanna whispered in his mind. Jon was the lawful king, but what made a man a lawful king? Blood, power, loyalty. Father, a voice broke through his troubled thoughts. Sansa was gazing at him, concerned. Do you like Lord Beric's idea for us to go riding this afternoon? Prince Oberyn must have already informed Lord Beric of the plans. Ned forced a brief smile to his lips. Of course, sweetling, it will be good for you to get some air outside the city walls. Thank you, father, she replied with a smile. She was such a gentle, trusting child. He felt a pang of guilt that he was sending her away. He still had not forgiven himself for the death of her wolf. Would Sansa ever forgive him for killing her wolf or lying to her now? They all departed one by one except for Ned and the men beside him. Is everything prepared? Yes, Lord Stark, Beric replied. We have the horses readied and all of our supplies. Ned retrieved a letter from the pouch which hung at his side. I have written this for the children. Allow them to read it when they are far from the city. Ride slowly at first. It would not help our cause if any suspicions are aroused. Of course, Ned sighed heavily. I cannot thank you enough for all that you are both doing and have done for my family. It has always been a pleasure, Lord Stark, Lord Beric replied with all sincerity. It is proving to be quite interesting, Oberyn replied. The men departed, leaving Ned alone for a few moments before Alan reappeared to assist Ned. Ned asked for his assistance in traveling to the Godswood and the man complied willingly. By the time they arrived, Ned was wishing that his leg could be removed for all the pain it was causing him. When he was seated by the heart tree, a faceless oak that could scarcely be considered a heart tree, Ned gave Alan a letter to be delivered right away. The man raised a brow in surprise at the name on the paper, but he left immediately to do his duty. It was some time later when she arrived. The Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, lovely and fair save for the healing bruise upon her cheek. Queen. As Ned's sister could have been, as Oberyn's sister should have been. He asked her if the king had ever struck her before, to which she claimed that he had never struck her face before. She said that her brother would have killed the king if Robert had ever dared to strike her in his presence. My brother is worth 100 of your friend, she then declared boldly. Your brother or your lover? He asked the question boldly, and to his shock she replied without hesitation. Both. She confessed that they had been lovers since they were children. 2 bodies and 1 person, she claimed. Why should she feel ashamed when the Targaryens had married brother to sister for generations? My son Bran, he saw us, she told him as she looked him directly in the eyes. Would you not do anything to protect one of your own children? Of course, he replied without hesitation. He had done so that very day by sending his children from the city. Then do you not think that I would do anything to protect my children? They are all James, he stated mildly. She laughed. Yes, thank the gods. He asked how it was that she had never been pregnant by Robert. She confessed that the only time she had been with child by her husband she found a way to end the pregnancy. In more recent years they scarcely had been in a bed together, and she had not allowed him to be truly intimate with her in a long time. He asked her what had caused her to hate Robert so much, and she answered him with fire in her eyes. She told him of her wedding night. She told him that while King Robert was drunkenly consummating their marriage, he called her Lyanna. Did it all come back to his sister, the little girl whom Ned could still in his mind's eye see so clearly as she played in the pools beside the ancient heart tree in Winterfell? The nearly grown girl who would race her horse at terrifying speeds through the Wolfswood. The young maiden who cried and shouted when she was betrothed to Robert Baratheon. The slightly older maiden who cried as the Prince of Dragonstone played his harp and sang. The young mother who died of childbed fever shortly after he arrived beside her bed. Promise me, Ned. He did not know if he should weep or curse his sister's bones. He had never known how he should feel about his sister after she had died. Did she think for a moment of how many lives one decision would ruin? Robert would have hated my sister, he said darkly. She looked up at him in shock. She was much like you, he continued. Beautiful and spirited, she would never have backed down to him, and if he had struck her she would have killed him. Would you? The color drained from her face. I would never dare to kill a king, Lord Stark. He bowed his head. You know that I must tell him the truth when he returns. Must. She softened her voice and laid a gentle hand upon his leg. Her hair shone with golden red light in the waning sunlight. She trailed her hand along his thigh as she spoke. She told him that a man does as he wills and not as he must. She told him that the realm would need a strong hand to rule the realm while Joffrey grew. She removed her hand from his leg and touched his cheek, his hair. If friends can turn to enemies, enemies can become friends. Your wife is 1,000 leagues away and my brother has fled. Be kind to me, Ned. I swear to you that you shall not regret it. Did you make the same offer to Jon Arryn? She scoffed at him. And slapped him. I shall wear it as a badge of honor, Ned said, repeating the very words which she had spoken when King Robert had hit her. Honor, she spat the word at him. You of all people dare speak to me of honor. How many bastards do you have, Lord Stark? 2 have been gallivanting around the Red Keep for weeks. A 3rd is said to have arrived just yesterday. Tell me, does your wife love you better for your bastards? All with Ashara Dayne, who was once the most sought-after woman in Princess Alia's retinue. You dare to speak to me of honor, and right and wrong when you have gone to another woman's bed and declared her children as your own while your wife could do nothing. You insult me by insinuating that I would have made such an offer to Lord Arryn. The old man never knew anything about myself or my children. If he did, he never breathed a word of it where I or any of my people could hear. A man like you has walked in the flames of love and lust. You would do anything to preserve your children, well, so would I. If anything should happen to me or my children, my father would bring all of his armies to his side. What do you think would happen to your children if they were to remain here under such circumstances? But they would not be here, he knew that well enough. His children were far away from the Red Keep and King's Landing. Half of his children were safely in the north, and the rest were on their way to Dorne at that very moment. I do not wish for war, he replied simply. Neither do I. Her voice turned soft as silk again. Her hands returned to his face and thigh. The woman was maddeningly persistent. We could have peace today, Ned. Robert never needs to know. I am certain that with the life you have lived you have a dark secret or two. We could share this one. He wanted to laugh at the sheer absurdity of the situation. Ned held Rhaegar's heir in his custody and spoke to the queen as if her treasons were worse than his own. I will not deny that I have had many secrets, but if he knows, he will murder your children. If I was able to discover the truth, then I can assure you that it is only a matter of time before someone else discovers it as well. I was here when they presented Robert with the bodies of the Targaryen children. If Robert learns the truth, he would look upon them the same way he looked upon Rhaegar's children. I would not wish that upon anyone. Her hands stilled, and he could see her curiosity as she regarded him. You truly would wish for any child to be safe. Perhaps that is where your honor may be found. She brushed a thumb gently across his lower lip and then ran that hand through his beard. I know that your honor to your marriage vows is less than solid, and so does everyone in Westeros. It was Jaime who pushed your son from the window. I was shocked by his actions. A boy so young could easily have been silenced by a few threats or even by telling him a half-truth. Children of that age do not understand the ways of adults. He caught her hands, willing her to cease teasing him. And of the man who was sent to slit my son's throat. What? She nearly jumped in shock at his words. Her reaction was far too genuine to have been faked. She did not know that someone had been hired to murder Bran. Is that why your wife seized my brother? Yes, he answered honestly. She laughed. Why would Tyrion try to kill your boy? He has no reason to kill your son. Jaime would never hire a sword when his own hand could do the killing. I would never do such a loathsome deed. The boy was unconscious, and it was only by the will of the gods that he awoke and has no memory of what he saw. He dropped her hands at a loss for words. You do not seem to have all of the answers anymore, Lord Stark. He smiled wanly at her. I have never had all of the answers, your grace. Is that why you did not take the throne when you had the chance? He bit back a bitter laugh. I had no desire to sit upon the throne. Then that was your mistake, Lord Stark. She stood and looked down upon him, her hair illumined by the sun which was sinking low in the sky behind her. She seemed a bit like a lioness as looked down upon him. You should have taken the throne when you saw my brother seated upon it, the mad king dead at his feet. A terrible mistake. I have made many mistakes in my life, but that was not one of them. Oh, but it was, my lord. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. With that, she walked away from him and returned to the keep. It was some hours later when Prince Oberyn and Alan appeared to escort him back to the Tower of the Hand. Are they gone? Ned asked Oberyn the moment he saw the man. They are well on their way to safety, he replied. Did you ask her? Ned bowed his head. It is as I suspected. She admitted it, he hissed, drawing himself to within an inch of Ned's face. Yes, I told her to flee the city and she did not seem interested. Oberyn swore fiercely. Don't you see, he spat when Ned looked upon the prince in confusion. They were standing just outside the door of the Tower of the Hand. If she does not fear the truth or wish to flee from the city, it can only mean one thing. She does not anticipate the king returning from the hunt alive.